Chapter 1298. When buried heaven saw the bright moon in the gloomy sky, the blade of his sword trembled visibly. No one knew what it was thinking, or what it was feeling. But it only hesitated for a moment before continuing to fly forward, heading straight for the bright moon in the sky. Then, Ancestor 3 Absolutes chased after it. He also saw the gigantic bright moon in the night sky at the end of the sea. But he did not think too much about it. He only cared about chasing after Ji Tianqing and catching up to that broken sword as quickly as possible. Whoosh! Both parties tore through the night sky one after the other, quickly flying 500 kilometers away. At this moment, both parties were extremely close to the bright moon, only 100 kilometers away. Only when they were close enough could they see clearly that there were several dozen pitch-black mountains standing on the dark sea. Each mountain was 3,000 meters tall, their surface covered in pitch-black, ancient reefs. There was not a hint of green, not even a blade of grass growing. A total of 81 mysterious mountains stood on the dark sea, forming a circle. From afar, the 81 mountains looked like 81 tall and mighty guards, forming a circle to protect something. The area surrounded by the 81 mountains had a radius of 300 kilometers. This area was not the sea, but an incomparably gigantic, pitch-black abyss. Seawater gathered from all directions, passing through the gaps between the mountains and surging into the pitch-black abyss. There was not a hint of light in the abyss, making it impossible to see the bottom. One could not even hear the surging of the seawater. No one knew just how deep the abyss was, or where it led to. This abyss was like a bottomless pit. No matter how much seawater poured in, it would never be filled. Directly above the bottomless abyss, in the night sky, a gigantic boulder with a radius of 5 kilometers floated. It was not an ordinary rock or reef, but a mysterious gigantic boulder that was completely milky white, like a peerless spiritual jade. The gigantic boulder was circular, like a platform with a radius of 5 kilometers. It floated motionlessly in the night sky. Its entire body emitted a bright white light, containing a divine and powerful energy. It was like a god from the 9 heavens, so noble and dignified that one could not help but worship it. It also seemed to contain the essence of the entire world, making people feel that the world was vast and boundless, as if it had existed since time immemorial. Without a doubt, this was a divine stone that seized the fortune of heaven and earth, a divine stone that was refined by the sun and moon. The bright moon in the sky that the burial of heaven and old ancestor 3 Absolutes had seen from afar was this gigantic divine rock. Swish, oh! The sword of burial of heaven cut through the night sky and flew to the edge of the bottomless abyss, stopping on a pitch-black mountain peak. It remained motionless in the night sky, not daring to fly any further. Immediately after, Forefather 3 Absolutes flew over as well. With a swoosh, he stopped 3,000 meters away from it. He was thousands of feet away from the sword of burial of heaven, facing off against it, but he didn't dare to take another step forward. If he took another step forward, he would be close to the pitch-black mountain peak, which would mean that he had stepped into the bottomless abyss. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes stood in the night sky, frowning as he sized up his surroundings. When he saw the 81 mountains around him and the huge god stone in the night sky, his expression changed drastically. This place it's actually here. I actually chased it all the way here. At that moment, his face turned as white as paper. His face was filled with terror, and his eyes were filled with intense fear. Even his forehead was dripping with bean-sized beads of sweat. Previously, when he was fighting with Ji Tianqing and chasing after the sword of burial of heaven, he didn't sweat at all. And now, when he saw the surrounding terrain clearly, he thought of a certain forbidden legend and broke out in cold sweat. The whistling cold wind blew over, causing his robe to flutter. His body trembled. His heart was filled with fear as he moved his feet. Stepping on the night sky, he retreated step by step. It seemed that staying near the bottomless abyss for one more breath was a great terror to him. It was because he had guessed that this was the legendary number 1 forbidden ground in the world, the platform of 9 heavens. On the Tianxian land, there was an extremely ancient legend that seemed to have originated from the ancient times. There were no boundaries between heaven and earth. The gods taught all living beings, preached and taught for the sake of good weather and peace in the human world. The common people struggled to survive and prospered. Psychics practiced martial arts and only sought to understand and communicate with heaven and earth. The weak were like ants, lying in the mud. The strong were like divine dragons, roaming the 9 heavens. All prosperity and decline were determined by the heavens, and everything in the world had its own rules. However, with the arrival of a calamity that swept across the world, all the rules of the world were broken. The people were plunged into misery and suffering, and the gods fell. The former civilization and glory were burned to ashes in the flames of war. There were boundaries between heaven and earth. The weak could only hide in the mud and struggle to survive. The strong could not break the shackles and could only turn into white bones along with the vicissitudes of life. This was a fallen and despairing world. However, with the favor of the heavens, there was still a trace of hope in a hopeless situation. In this world, there was a mysterious place that connected the 9 heavens and the 9 underworlds. It was called the Platform of 9 Heavens. That place was filled with the danger of being burned to ashes and the great terror of certain death. However, there was also a trace of opportunity that could connect the heavens. Since ancient times, countless experts had heard of this legend and vowed to find the Platform of 9 Heavens to reach the heavens in a single step. However, no matter if it was a peerless genius or a peerless genius, once they stepped into that place, it would be difficult for them to escape the fate of being burned to ashes. It was even to the extent that martial artists who had yet to become primordial soul supremes would only have a slim chance of surviving if they even approached the Platform of 9 Heavens. Old ancestor Sanju had lived for close to 2,000 years and was very knowledgeable. Of course, he knew of the legend of the Platform of 9 Heavens. Du Tian's sect was originally located in the eastern sea's ruins of End, so he naturally knew that the Platform of 9 Heavens was at the end of the ruins of End. However, he did not know how terrifying the Platform of 9 Heavens was and why it was a forbidden place with no chance of survival. However, he did not doubt the authenticity of the legend. That was because his master, the founder of Du Tian's sect, had died in the Platform of 9 Heavens. 1,800 years ago, the founder of Du Tian's sect had been stuck in the half-step primordial soul realm for several hundred years and finally lost his patience. In order to find an opportunity to break through to the primordial soul realm, he did not care about the danger to his life and insisted on going to the Platform of 9 Heavens, wanting to risk his life. He would either die without a burial place or reach the heavens in a single step. However, the ending was very tragic. The founder of Du Tian's sect had just stepped into the area of the Platform of 9 Heavens and had not even touched the mysterious stone platform before he was burned to ashes. At that time, old ancestor Sanju was still a young disciple and had not heard of the legend of the Platform of 9 Heavens. However, from then on, he firmly remembered that the Platform of 9 Heavens was the most terrifying place in the world. He would never go near the Platform of 9 Heavens in this lifetime unless he did not want to live anymore. At this moment, old ancestor Sanju's heart was filled with fear and terror. He recalled the legend of the Platform of 9 Heavens in his mind as he retreated step by step, gradually leaving the area of the Platform of 9 Heavens. Finally, 100 breaths of time passed. Chapter 1299. Forefather Sanju did not leave. He stopped 5 kilometers away from the mountain and stared at the sword of burial of heaven. Although he was in awe of the 9 Heavens platform, he did not want to leave this place. However, he was unwilling to leave just like that, and it was even more impossible for him to let Ji Tianqing go just like that. The night sky was dark and the sea breeze whistled. The air was filled with a murderous aura. A man and a sword stood 10 miles away from each other, facing each other without moving an inch. Forefather Sanju calmed down and shouted coldly, "Ji Tianqing, this is the end of the ultimate. It's a dead end. You have nowhere to run now that you've escaped here. Accept your fate. Surrender obediently, and perhaps I can spare your life." The Heaven Burier sword floated in the night sky, motionless and not making a single sound. Forefather Sanju was not embarrassed at all. He continued with a dignified expression, perhaps you don't know where this is. I can tell you that this is the legendary Nine Heavens platform, the #1 forbidden area in the world. You only have 2 choices now. Either you enter the Nine Heavens platform and die without a burial place. Or you surrender to me, and you might be able to keep your life. You are a smart person and a rare genius. I believe you will make the right choice. The sword of burial of heaven remained silent. It did not make any sound or move, as if it had become one with the night sky. Forefather Sanju was not in a hurry. He stared at the sword of burial of heaven and said coldly, I'll give you 2 hours. Think about it carefully. With that, he secretly cast a spell and released an invisible divine soul power, setting up a divine soul seal around him. He wanted to seal the surrounding sea region so that the sword of burial of heaven could not escape. Inside the sword of burial of heaven, the world within the sword. Ji Tianqing was in the city lord's mansion of peaceful Soil City, sitting in a secret room to heal himself. After an entire day of recuperation, his injuries and magic power had recovered. Even his weak divine soul had quickly recovered under the nourishment of the heaven-mending pearl. After a while, he ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. Phew, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and a gratified expression appeared on his face. I've finally recovered to my peak state. I can fight another 300 rounds with old ancestor 3 absolutes. He wondered where the burial of heaven had fled to. Had he managed to shake off old ancestor Sanju? Yao Yao has been recuperating in seclusion for a few days now. How is she doing now? He muttered to himself, got up, and walked out of the secret room. 10 breaths later, he entered the secret room next door. In the dimly lit secret room, the spirit stones in the formation were shining with a faint 5-colored brilliance. Yin Yao, who was dressed in a white dress, was sitting in the middle of the array. She was concentrating on cultivating with her hands on her knees. Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to investigate and found that her injuries and mana had recovered. Thus, he hurriedly woke Yin Yao up and said to her, Yao Yao, hurry and wake up. I have something important to tell you. Yin Yao heard his voice and hurriedly stopped cultivating. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Seeing that he was safe and sound, Yin Yao asked with confusion, Tianqing, how did you enter the sword world? What happened? Ji Tianqing said with a serious expression, Yao Yao, ever since you fainted, a lot of things have happened. Let me tell you in detail. Then, he told her everything that happened after Yin Yao fainted, how he interrogated Ji Wuxia, how he killed his way into the Heaven sect, and how he rescued the little black dragon. After hearing this, Yin Yao let out a sigh of relief. She said with a gratified expression, thank goodness you successfully rescued the little black dragon. However, the Heaven sect is filled with powerful cultivators. How did you escape? Ji Tianqing revealed a bitter smile and explained, I caused a huge ruckus in the Heaven sect and alerted the sect master, Lu Feiyu, as well as the Grand Elder, Ancestor Sanju. Lu Feiyu is still alright as he's only at the 9th level of the spirit refinement stage. However, Ancestor Sanju has lived for 2,000 years and is a half-step into the primordial soul stage cultivator. I escaped from the Heaven sect with great difficulty, but I was chased down by the 2 of them. I don't know if the burial of heaven was able to shake them off. Yin Yao's expression changed. She revealed a look of worry, 9th level of the spirit refinement stage? Half-step into the primordial soul stage? Such power is comparable to great god He Yu and the imperial tutor. Ji Tianqing nodded, thank goodness we had the help of the burial of heaven, which was why we were able to escape successfully. Otherwise, I would have been captured by Ancestor Sanju long ago. Yin Yao frowned slightly. She said sternly, Tianqing, what do you plan on doing now? The Jinshan King's injuries have recovered as well. How about the 3 of us work together to deal with Ancestor Sanju? Ji Tianqing shook his head and smiled bitterly, you and the Jinshan King can't do anything against experts like Lu Feiyu and Ancestor Sanju. Just stay in the peaceful Earth City and cultivate. I obtained the Neptunian God Orb from the Sun-Moon Furnace before, but I never had the chance to give it to you. I'll give this orb to you now. Fuse with and refine it as soon as possible. You might benefit greatly from it." With that, he took out an ocean blue god orb from his space ring and handed it to Yunyao. Yunyao held the Neptunian god orb. However, she was filled with mixed feelings. She said with mixed feelings, "Tianqing, it's all because I've dragged you down. In order to find the Neptunian god orb, you were forced to enter the Eastern Sea's ruins end, which is why you've caused such a great disaster and endured such great danger." Before she could finish, Ji Tianqing held her hands and shook his head with a smile. "How can I be a burden between us? Don't ever mention the word burden to me. Don't think too much. Refine the Neptunian god orb as soon as possible. I still need to ask the burial of heaven about our current situation." Yunyao nodded and accepted the Neptunian god orb silently. She warned him in worry, "Tianqing, you have to be careful. You can't let anything happen to you no matter what." "Don't worry," Ji Tianqing waved his hand with a smile before leaving the secret room. The secret room fell silent once more. Yunyao pondered silently for a long time before beginning to refine the Neptunian god orb. After bidding farewell to Yunyao, Ji Tianqing went to visit the little black dragon, Qianyu, and the Jinshan king. The little black dragon's wounds were just too heavy. He was still in secluded cultivation, and it would probably take another half a month for him to recover. When Qianyu underwent the heavenly tribulation, he was covered in wounds from the lightning as well. He was barely alive. Now, he was still in secluded cultivation. 80% of his wounds had already recovered, and his strength was skyrocketing. As for the Jinshan king, he had already recovered from his wounds. He was currently dealing with matters in peaceful Soil City. Only then did Ji Tianqing return to the secret room. He asked the burial of heaven about the current situation secretly. "Burial of heaven, where have we fled to now? Have you shaken off Ancestor 3 severing?" The burial of heaven remained silent for a while before replying sternly, "Ancestor 3 severing strength is extraordinary, and his methods are extraordinary as well. I haven't shaken him off. Moreover, I've already fled to the end of the ruins end. There's nowhere for me to run." Chapter 1300. The Nine Heavens Platform. Ji Tianqing was stunned, and his expression became extremely ugly. He instinctively wanted to leave the sword world and see what was going on outside. However, the burial of heaven immediately reminded him, "Don't come out. The Nine Heavens Platform is the #1 forbidden ground in the world. If you show yourself, you'll definitely be reduced to ashes." With that, it connected to Ji Tianqing's soul and presented the scene it saw clearly to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing immediately saw the burial of heaven's sword hovering in the dark night sky. Not far away was a dark sea, and below it was a pitch-black mountain that was 3,000 meters tall. There were 81 black mountains in the surroundings, and they surrounded a bottomless abyss. In the sky above the abyss, there was a white divine stone that was 5 kilometers wide. It was like a bright moon hanging in the sky. When he saw this, he was immediately filled with shock. His eyes were filled with surprise. The legendary Nine Heavens Platform really is at the end of the East Sea's bottomless abyss. I've read about the Nine Heavens Platform in history books before. It's said that this is the #1 forbidden ground in the world, and it's a place where death is certain. However, from the looks of it, there's no great danger here apart from the unique terrain and majestic atmosphere. The burial of heaven fell silent for a while before saying sternly, "You can't see the danger because your cultivation is too low." Ji Tianqing fell silent. After a pause, the burial of heaven continued. 1,000 years ago, Kenshin found a shattered divine pearl in the East Sea's bottomless abyss by chance. He found a strand of remnant divine power in it. After investigating and deducing, he confirmed that the divine pearl was related to the legendary goddess Yaoguang. As a result, he placed the divine pearl on the Nine Heavens Platform and let it absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and the essence of the sun and moon. Ji Tianqing hurriedly nodded. "That's right, I've heard of this. I also know that the Patriarch came to the Nine Heavens platform over 20 years ago and took away the Neptunian divine pearl. Afterwards, the Patriarch returned to the central plane and used the Neptunian divine orb to save Yunyao's life, implanting it into Yunyao's body. Because of this, Yunyao obtained the inheritance of Goddess Yaoguang and became the reincarnation of Goddess Yaoguang. Burial of Heaven continued. Since you already know the whole story, you should understand the mysteries and terrors of the Nine Heavens platform. You must value this place and take this opportunity to familiarize yourself with it. Although I don't know the exact reason, I am certain that this place will be extremely important to you in the future. It may even affect your future. Ji Tianqing's expression suddenly became serious, and he firmly remembered its words. However, he couldn't help but ask, Burial of Heaven, could this Nine Heavens platform have something to do with my breakthrough to the primordial spirit realm? Or, does this place have anything to do with the Kenshin? Burial of Heaven remained silent for a long time, as if it was deep in thought and searching through its fragmented memories for any relevant information. After a long time, it said in a low and solemn tone, I vaguely remember that Kenshin came here and stayed for a very long time. He seemed to have left the profound sky continent from here. What? Ji Tianqing's body trembled, and his eyes revealed a look of intense shock. Kenshin left the profound sky continent from here? Could this be the entrance to the Shenwu continent? Long before Lu Yin had left the central plane, he had discussed the ancestral demon god with Yunyao and Burial of Heaven, as well as information about the Shenwu continent. At that time, he had learned that there were 5 vast continents in this world. However, after the Great War between the gods had placed a seal on each of the continents, causing them to be cut off from each other. However, in the tens of thousands of years since ancient times, the seal between the continents would loosen, creating some gaps. This allowed an extremely small number of powerhouses to find a way to leave the profound sky continent and the opportunity to do so. Ji Tianqing pondered silently for a while and roughly understood some things. He couldn't help but murmur, it seems that the Nine Heavens platform is the gap between the continents, which is equivalent to the door to the Shenwu continent. One day, if I can become a primordial spirit supreme and eliminate the ancient demon emperor, I will also leave the profound sky continent and pursue the martial path. At that time, I will have to come here and pass through the Nine Heavens platform to reach the Shenwu continent. At that moment, Ancestor Triforce's voice rang out from the night sky. Ji Tianqing, the 2-hour time limit is up. You should make a choice. Step into the Nine Heavens platform and turn into ashes, or submit to me. Ancestor Triforce's voice was low and cold, and it was filled with a domineering aura. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and stared at the night sky 5 kilometers away, carefully sizing up Ancestor Triforce. This Ancestor Triforce is quite persistent. He chased me all the way here and still isn't willing to give up. He even wants to steal my black dragon and divine sword? What wishful thinking. Burial of Heaven transmitted, this person knows about the legends of the Nine Heavens platform, and he also knows that this is the world's #1 forbidden area. He definitely won't dare to step into the Nine Heavens platform. However, he's been guarding this place and isn't willing to leave. He's even set up a seal around the area, which is a troublesome matter. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, since he doesn't dare to approach the Nine Heavens platform, then it's much easier. We'll just wait with him. Burial of Heaven was silent for a while before calmly reminding Lu Yin, don't forget that he's lived for 2,000 years. Moreover, he's determined to obtain the black dragon and divine sword, so he definitely has enough patience. Ji Tianqing was stunned. Then we'll see how things go. Burial of Heaven thought for a moment and reminded him, I know what I'm doing. Leave this matter to me, and you don't have to bother with him. I'll now impart to you the 3rd move of Burial of Heaven's 9 swords. You must focus on cultivating in seclusion and try to master it as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing weighed the pros and cons for a moment before agreeing. After that, Burial of Heaven imparted the 3rd move of Burial of Heaven's 9 swords to him without missing a single word. He listened attentively twice and memorized the incantation. Then, he began to cultivate in seclusion to comprehend the 3rd move. The third move was the same as the first two moves. It had an extremely simple name, and it was called sword swing. Drawing the sword, thrusting the sword, and swinging the sword. When these three moves were connected, it was the foundation of a martial artist's practice of the sword. It was also the origin of all sword techniques. After all, this was a supreme sword technique that had returned to its original simplicity. The seemingly simple swordsmanship actually contained the world's top sword concept. Of course, from the fourth move onwards, the names of the sword techniques would not be so simple. Ji Tianxing memorized the incantation of the sword technique in his heart, and he could recite it backwards. Then, he calmed his heart and comprehended the profoundness within it. Moreover, he was deducing the circulation of magic power, the trajectory, strength, and angle of the sword in his mind. Time passed quickly. Unknowingly, another 4 hours had passed. A blazing white light flew over from afar and arrived near the Nine Heavens platform. It stopped beside Forefather Three Absolutes. It was Lu Feiyu. His face was slightly pale, and he was panting heavily. He was also rather weak, and he seemed very anxious and urgent. When he saw Forefather Three Absolutes, he let out a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Forefather Three Absolutes glanced at him unhappily and asked him why he had only arrived now. Chapter 1301. Old Ancestor Sanju also knew that when he was chasing after the Sword of Burial of Heaven, he was simply too fast. With Lu Feiyu's strength, it was impossible for him to catch up. It was understandable for him to go in the wrong direction. Seeing his awkward expression, Old Ancestor Sanju didn't say anything. After a while, Lu Feiyu calmed down. He took a pill to recover his Fa as he looked around. Seeing the situation around him and the broken sword 10 miles away, Lu Feiyu immediately frowned. His eyes were filled with shock. Grand Elder, this place is a bit strange. Why don't you dare to go in? Could this be? Old Ancestor Sanju stared at the broken sword. He didn't even look at him as he replied indifferently, "That's right, this is the Nine Heavens platform." Hiss. Lu Feiyu's expression changed drastically. He sucked in a breath of cold air. He even subconsciously took 2 steps back, wanting to get away from the Nine Heavens platform. As the current sect leader of the Heaven Evasion sect, he obviously knew many legends and secrets. He also knew how the founder of the Heaven Evasion sect had died. After a moment of silence, he calmed down and asked seriously, "Grand Elder, that brat Ji Tianxing is hiding at the edge of the Nine Heavens platform under the protection of the Divine Sword. What should we do? Are we just going to face it like this?" Old Ancestor Sanju turned his head slightly and glanced at him indifferently. "Do you have a better idea?" Lu Feiyu didn't say anything. Although he thought that the two of them facing off against a broken sword was quite comical, he was extremely fearful of the Nine Heavens platform. He felt fear from the bottom of his heart and didn't dare to act rashly. As such, he could only stand behind Old Ancestor Sanju and face off against the Sword of Burial of Heaven from 10 miles away. Time continued to pass. The night gradually disappeared. A new day had arrived and the sun rose. At noon, the scorching sun hung high in the sky, shining down countless rays of golden light that enveloped the heavens and earth. The Nine Heavens platform seemed to have a life of its own as it crazily devoured the golden sunlight. A strange scene appeared. The Nine Heavens platform shone brightly with golden light. Sunlight couldn't reach the Nine Heavens platform, and it was as dark as ever. As for the bottomless abyss surrounded by mountains, it was as dark as night, as if it could swallow the sunlight and light. The 81 mountains around the Nine Heavens platform also exuded an invisible and majestic aura that enveloped a radius of several hundred miles. Although they were all inanimate objects, they formed an extraordinary and formless array that connected to the heavens and earth. This kind of mysterious array was definitely not something that mortals could understand. Perhaps only deities could break it. The invisible power emitted by the heaven and earth great array was enough to crush and kill any martial artist. When Forefather Three Absolutes and Lu Feiyu sensed the power of the heaven and earth grand formation, they became even more respectful towards the Nine Heavens platform. The sun rose from the east and set in the west. The day passed quickly. By noon the next day, the sword of burial of heaven was still at the edge of the Nine Heavens platform. It didn't even move an inch. Old Ancestor Sanju's patience was running out. He could not hold it in any longer. He furrowed his brows and bellowed with a murderous look, "Ji Tianqing. You despicable little bastard, are you trying to stall for time with me?" The sword of burial of heaven did not react at all. Old Ancestor Sanju narrowed his eyes. A cold killing intent flashed through his eyes. "Little bastard, my patience is limited. Your time has come." As he spoke, he waved his hands and shot out 36 golden swords that shot towards the sword of burial of heaven. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The 36 golden swords shot towards the sword of burial of heaven at the same time. They were about to hit it. However, the golden swords were suppressed by the formless power of the array just as they flew above the pitch-black mountain. They instantly disappeared without a trace. From beginning to end, the sword of burial of heaven did not move at all. It was as if it had expected this result. Old Ancestor Sanju's expression became even more unsightly. He waved his hands again and shot out a vast amount of spiritual energy that turned into invisible spiritual blades that shot towards the sword of burial of heaven. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dozens of invisible spiritual blades instantly pierced through the sky and arrived in front of the sword of burial of heaven. However, the heaven and earth array's supreme power immediately swallowed these spiritual blades. The sky was calm as if nothing had happened. Old Ancestor Sanju was completely helpless. He cursed angrily, "Damn it! That broken sword is hiding at the edge of the ninth heaven platform. My attacks are all ineffective." Lu Feiyu's eyes turned as she hurriedly reminded him, "Old Ancestor, that broken sword is hiding at the edge of the ninth heaven platform. There is no danger. We can go over and capture it at close range. If it is fine, we will be fine too." Old Ancestor Sanju was a little hesitant. He frowned and thought for a while before nodding. "All right, although the ninth heaven platform is terrifying, it is only a legend. No one has seen it with their own eyes. I don't believe it. We are only near the edge of the ninth heaven platform. What danger can there be if we don't enter it?" With that, he brought Lu Feiyu and flew towards the sword of burial of heaven. Whoosh! Whoosh! The two figures flashed and crossed 10 miles in the blink of an eye. They flew above the pitch-black mountain and arrived in front of the sword of burial of heaven. The two sides were only 3,000 meters apart. Lu Feiyu waved her golden broadsword without hesitation and slashed at the sword of burial of heaven. Earth-splitting sword. The golden broadsword condensed into a sword ray that was 300 meters long and slashed at the sword of burial of heaven. Old Ancestor Sanju also waved his palms and used a secret technique. He released 6 wild golden dragons that were 300 meters long and attacked the sword of burial of heaven. Instantly, the sword of burial of heaven was drowned in the dazzling sword ray and wild dragons. It was in the middle of a raging wave. It dodged left and right with all its might and dodged Lu Feiyu's wild attacks in the blink of an eye. However, the 6 wild dragons released by Old Ancestor Sanju were like living creatures that attacked it crazily. The sword of burial of heaven could only dodge with all its might. It could neither retreat nor take the attacks head-on. After all, it could not cross the boundary of the pitch-black mountain. Once it entered the range of the Nine Heavens platform, it would face unexpected danger. In just 10 breaths, Lu Feiyu and Old Ancestor Sanju had launched over 100 wild attacks. Endless sword light and dragon shadows enveloped half of the mountain peak. Whenever the sword rays and dragon shadows came into contact with the heaven and earth formation, they would be devoured without a trace. However, the sword of burial of heaven was unable to break out of the encirclement. Instead, it was forced into a passive position and its situation became more and more dangerous. Finally, old ancestor Sanju sent out 2 golden palms with all his might and slammed them against the sword of burial of heaven. The sword of burial of heaven was immediately sent flying and was about to enter the 9 heavens platform. At the critical moment, it released a mysterious and powerful black light, which wrapped around Lu Feiyu, who was swinging her sword at him. Lu Feiyu's expression immediately changed as he struggled in fear. No. However, he was unable to break free from the black light. The sword of burial of heaven brought him across the pitch-black mountain and into the 9 heavens platform. A man and a sword were wrapped together as they flew above the bottomless abyss. They were still several dozen kilometers away from the 9 heavens platform. Chapter 1302. Just a moment ago, the sky was still blue and the sun was shining brightly. Now, a large patch of dark clouds appeared out of nowhere and pressed down. The 9 heavens platform area within a few hundred miles turned pitch black, as if night had fallen. Above the 9 heavens platform, purple lightning flashed within the dark clouds. It was obvious that they were accumulating power. Seeing this, old ancestor Sanju's body shook and his eyes widened. Although he did not know what kind of great terror was hidden in the 9 heavens platform, he knew that he was in deep trouble. However, he knew that something bad was about to happen. A disaster was about to descend. Lu Feiyu. He growled anxiously, waving his palm and unleashing a huge golden palm, grabbing towards Lu Feiyu. He wanted to grab Lu Feiyu and pull him back. However, the sword of burial of heaven released a mysterious black light that wrapped around Lu Feiyu tightly, making him unable to move at all. Seeing the huge golden palm coming, the sword of burial of heaven accelerated towards the 9 heavens platform. In old ancestor Sanju's eyes, the sword of burial of heaven was rushing towards the 9 heavens platform to take Lu Feiyu down with it. The huge golden palm was about to catch up to Lu Feiyu. However, right at this moment, the formless heaven and earth great formation unleashed an unparalleled and vast power that crushed down ruthlessly. Crack! The huge golden palm that old ancestor Sanju struck out was instantly crushed into pieces and dissipated in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, old ancestor Sanju was in complete despair. He wanted to rush into the 9 heavens platform area and try to save Lu Feiyu. However, the formless power of the heaven and earth formation formed a huge barrier that sealed off the 9 heavens platform area. He had just touched the formless barrier when he was sent flying by the terrifying power. Pfft! Old ancestor Sanju spat out a mouthful of blood and fell 10 miles away with a pale face. His internal organs had been shaken out of place, and his 6 organs had been damaged. His soul had also become blurry. He only stopped after flying 10 miles away. His body was bent over as he stood above the sea, panting heavily. At the same time, an unforgettable scene appeared. The burial of heaven sword wrapped around Lu Feiyu and flew a dozen miles away. They were now in the air above the bottomless abyss, not far from the 9 heavens platform. From the dark clouds above the 9 heavens platform, a dazzling bolt of lightning suddenly shot out and blasted towards the sword of burial of heaven and Lu Feiyu. Boom! In that instant, a thunderous explosion that shook the 9 heavens resounded through the sea for thousands of miles, causing huge waves to roll up on the surface of the sea. The dazzling pillar of lightning was thousands of meters long and as thick as a giant dragon. It was like a giant sword tearing the dark sky apart. The speed of the lightning strike was too fast. Lu Feiyu and the sword of burial of heaven could not dodge it. They were instantly drowned by the dazzling lightning. Progenitor 3 Absolutes watched as Lu Feiyu was struck by the lightning beam. His body suddenly trembled and turned into black charcoal. His body curled up in a hunched position. Then, the destructive lightning power blasted his body into pieces, turning him into a large pile of black ash that spread out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, Lu Feiyu's body and soul were destroyed. He was truly reduced to ashes. Oh my God! Is this the legendary 9 heavens divine thunder, the true might of heaven Duke? Even with Lu Feiyu's strength, he could not resist at all and was reduced to ashes in an instant. Progenitor 3 Absolutes was dumbfounded. He was filled with fear and shock. He did not doubt that even if he was struck by the 9 heavens' divine thunder, he would end up like Lu Feiyu. He would be reduced to ashes without a corpse. When he thought of this, his back broke out in cold sweat. He only felt a lingering fear. Fortunately, he was not rash and did not rush into the 9 heavens platform to save Lu Feiyu. After witnessing the scene of Lu Feiyu being killed by the lightning, he did not feel sad or regretful at all. He was only filled with fear and shock. He subconsciously distanced himself from the 9 heavens platform, afraid that he would be struck by the terrifying 9 heavens divine thunder. Of course, he also decided that he would never enter the 9 heavens platform in this lifetime. At this moment, the dazzling pillar of lightning turned into millions of purple lightning arcs and dissipated with a bang. Countless lightning arcs drifted in the air and filled the entire 9 heavens platform. In the black clouds that covered the sky, there were no more lightning arcs. The black clouds also gradually dispersed and disappeared. Heaven and earth regained its peace. The 9 heavens platform regained its light. Progenitor 3 Absolutes stared at the 9 heavens platform in a daze. After observing for a while, he suddenly realized that there was a smear of black on the 9 heavens platform. He took a closer look and saw that it was a black sword. It was the sword of burial of heaven. That sword was struck by the divine thunder together with Lu Feiyu. Lu Feiyu was reduced to ashes. How is it safe and sound? Progenitor 3 Absolutes frowned and revealed an expression of shock and disbelief. He took a closer look and realized that the sword of burial of heaven was floating on the 9 heavens platform, motionless. On the surface, it looked like the sword of burial of heaven was not damaged at all. But in reality, the sword was surrounded by dense purple lightning arcs that were still crackling and flashing. Those were the remnants of the 9 heavens divine thunder. Its power was still terrifying. As time passed, the lightning arcs gradually dissipated. In the end, they all disappeared. Progenitor 3 Absolutes patiently watched the entire process. His expression became more and more interesting. He revealed a look of shock, anger, greed, and helplessness. Damn it! That broken sword is indeed a divine artifact. It can actually withstand the attack of the 9 heavens divine thunder and even dissolve the remnant power of the divine thunder. What a pity! If I get it, I can definitely use its power to break through to the primordial soul realm and become a supreme being. Intense anger and greed made Progenitor 3 Absolute's face turn ashen. The veins on his forehead bulged, and he clenched his fists so tightly that they creaked. He hesitated for a long time before finally making up his mind. Wait. No matter what, he would not give up on that divine sword. Even if he had to wait 100 years, 1,000 years, until the seas dried up, he would wait until that divine sword walked out of the 9 heavens platform. In my life, in the past 2,000 years, I've only heard of the 3 great imperial courts having divine artifacts that illuminated the world. It's a pity that I've never come into contact with them. Obtaining a divine artifact is my only hope of breaking through to the primordial soul realm. I definitely cannot give up this chance. Even if I have to wait until I die of old age, I must obtain that divine sword. Progenitor 3 Absolutes stood in the sky and looked at the sword of the burial of heaven on the 9 heavens platform. His expression was indifferent as he muttered in a firm tone, "The divine sword is immortal. It can hide in the 9 heavens platform and not come out. But that little bastard Ji Tianqing can't hide in the divine sword forever." After saying that, he took out a prayer mat made of spiritual jade from his spatial ring. He sat upright in the sky and closed his eyes to rest. He meditated to recover the magic power he had expended and heal the injuries he had suffered. At the same time, he secretly paid attention to the 9 heavens platform and stared at the sword of the burial of heaven. Chapter 1303. Unknowingly, 10 days passed. The burial of heaven continued to hover above the 9 heavens platform, motionless, as if it had fallen into a deep slumber. Forefather 3 Absolutes had plenty of patience. He continued to sit above the sea dozens of miles away, meditating with his eyes closed. Let alone 10 days, even if it took 10 years or 100 years, he would still wait. Inside the burial of heaven, the world within the sword. Ji Tianqing was still in Antares City. He sat in the secret chamber of the city lord's residence, quietly comprehending the third sword of the burial of heaven's 9 swords. After 10 days of contemplation, he had already grasped the true meaning of the third sword and vaguely comprehended this sword art. Sword draw stance, divine sword splitting mountains and rivers. Sword thrust stance, a cold star illuminates the heavens. This third sword move, sword swing stance, one strike can shock the world, sword light traversing 30,000 miles. Ji Tianqing muttered in a low voice as he slowly opened his eyes. His entire body exuded an invisible aura that was as sharp as a giant sword, divine and dignified. In his eyes, a soaring sword intent burst forth, tearing through the dark space of the secret chamber like lightning. I understand now. The 9 swords of the burial of heaven is the ultimate technique of the burial of heaven, not only because it encompasses all sword arts in the world, but also because it contains the ultimate will of the sword Tao. The sword is life, facing death to live, advancing courageously, facing death to live. This is the spirit and sword intent of a sword Tao martial artist. Ji Tianqing muttered in a solemn tone as he closed his eyes once more. He controlled the divine soul golden sword and entered the Kenshin tomb. Whoosh! The divine soul golden sword transformed into human form, taking his appearance. It appeared in the dark and cold wasteland, floating above the 18 tombstones. The 9 tombstones on the left were as blank as before. The 9 tombstones on the right had changed. The first tombstone originally recorded the first level of the sword soul Tao, but it had now disappeared. The second tombstone was originally blank, but now more than 200 ancient characters had appeared. That was the cultivation method for the second level of the sword soul Tao. Ji Tianqing stared at the words on the tombstone. After observing for an hour, he finally memorized the incantation of the cultivation technique. Then, he flew over the cold wasteland and came to the edge of the wasteland. 3,000 meters in front of him was a gray, misty area. Amidst the fog, there was an empty area with a radius of 10 miles. The ground was made of gray rock, and densely packed lines and ravines were carved into it. It was the ancient formation hidden in Kenshin's tomb, a mysterious formation that even the burial of heaven did not understand. Ji Tianqing stared at the empty area, silently reciting the sword-wielding technique in his heart. He methodically accumulated his Fa Li and prepared to use the third sword move. 10 breaths later, he held a blazing white soul spell sword and unleashed all of his spiritual energy. He suddenly swung the sword and slashed at the misty area. Swing your sword. Sword light traversing 30,000 li. Shwa. The soul spell sword cut through the sky like lightning, slashing out a blinding white sword light that was 3,000 meters long and 100 meters wide. The sword light was enormous and contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. It was like the sword of the gods, but also like the wrath of the gods. Bang! The indestructible, blazing white sword light slashed into the misty area and exploded with a muffled sound. Suddenly, a hurricane swept up in a radius of 10 miles. Sword chi burst forth, and chaos ensued. The gray fog surged wildly and spread in all directions. In the blink of an eye, another empty area with a radius of 20 miles appeared in the misty area. Ji Tianqing slowly put down the soul spell sword, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. Great, my 10 days of hard work was not in vain. I finally mastered the third sword move. The power of the third sword move was obviously stronger than the previous 2 moves. This made him very satisfied. As long as he practiced more in the future and completely mastered the third sword move, the power of the sword move could continue to increase. He gathered his thoughts and hurriedly flew into the misty area, arriving at the empty area that had just been opened up. He saw that the empty area with a radius of 20 miles was also made of gray rock. There was no doubt that the ground was also densely covered in lines and lines, outlining an extremely ancient and mysterious formation. Ji Tianqing carefully observed for a while and found some clues. The newly opened empty area and the previous empty area were connected to each other, and it was at least 30 miles in radius. On such a vast ground, the tens of thousands of formation lines and lines were all the same and connected to each other. However, this was only the tip of the iceberg of the entire formation. He still could not find any useful clues. He still didn't know exactly how vast this mysterious grand formation hidden within the Sword God's tomb was. What was the grade of this array? Why was it hidden in the Kenshin tomb? How many years had it been hidden here? Ji Tianqing had no idea. Therefore, he flew back to the 18 tombstones and reached out to touch the first tombstone. The pitch-black and cold tombstone immediately released a hazy golden light and swallowed him. Swoosh! In the next moment, he entered a strange space and stood in the middle of a sea of clouds. In front of him was an ancient bridge made of white jade, shrouded in clouds and mist. On the other side of the bridge was a mysterious pagoda. It was the Heavenly Sutra Pavilion. He stepped across the stone bridge and entered the Heavenly Sutra Pavilion, where he began to browse through ancient books and materials. He wanted to use the books in the Heavenly Sutra Pavilion to understand the origins of the mysterious formation and the Kenshin tomb. Time quickly passed, but he seemed to be unaware, immersed in the sea of books. 3 days later, he had flipped through several hundred books on formations and finally found a clue. What he was certain of was that the mysterious formation in the tomb of the Sword God was a product of the primordial era. It was extremely ancient and had existed for a very long time. At that time, the various races of the world were still under the rule of the gods and were in a period of barbarism. The martial Tao had not yet flourished. Based on the lines, patterns, and techniques of the mysterious formation, Ji Tianqing could roughly determine that it was not an ordinary formation, but a divine formation laid down by the gods. Unfortunately, this was all he could find. Who had laid down this divine formation? What kind of formation was it? Why was it hidden in the Kenshin tomb? Ji Tianqing did not know any of these questions. He could only leave them for later exploration and investigation. A moment later, he walked out of the Heavenly Sutra Pavilion and left the Kenshin tomb. Swoosh! His divine soul and golden sword returned to his body. He was still sitting in the secret room in peaceful Earth City. After frowning in thought for a while, he put the matter of the mysterious formation aside for the time being. He decided to first contact Burial of Heaven and ask about the current situation. Burial of Heaven, what is our current situation? Has Ancestor Trial not left yet? Burial of Heaven was silent for a long time before saying in a low voice, 10 days ago, Ancestor Trial and Lu Feiyu tried to capture me and threw me into the Nine Heavens platform. However, I dragged Lu Feiyu down with me and was killed by the divine lightning of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 1304. Ji Tianqing was stunned by Burial of Heaven's words. It can't be, right? Burial of Heaven, you're a half-step divine tool. No matter how strong Lu Feiyu and old ancestor Sanju are, they can't beat you into the Nine Heavens platform. Burial of Heaven said in a gloomy tone, if it were any other day, they wouldn't be able to do anything to me. They wouldn't even be able to catch up to me. The situation at that time was special. The two of them were attacking me with all their might, and behind me was the bottomless abyss of the Nine Heavens platform. No matter how many tricks I have, no matter how powerful my divine abilities are, I can't use them. Burial of Heaven didn't seem angry when he mentioned this matter. His tone was calm and indifferent. Ji Tianqing noticed this and couldn't help but ask, if that's the case, aren't we in the Nine Heavens platform right now? Yes. Burial of Heaven replied. Ji Tianqing frowned and said with a worried tone, you're really ruthless. Even after being beaten into the Nine Heavens platform, you still want to drag Lu Feiyu down with you. The power of the Nine Heavens divine lightning is also terrifying. It actually turned Lu Feiyu into ashes. Burial of Heaven, how are your injuries? Are there any effects? Burial of Heaven said indifferently, although the 9 heavens divine lightning is terrifying, it can't do anything to me. After all, I was once a peak divine tool. I've even withstood the scarlet heavens divine lightning, golden leaf divine lightning, and world-extinguishing heavenly lightning. However, I still need to rest for a few more days to recover my vitality. When the time comes, we can do something big. When he said the last sentence, Burial of Heaven's tone was a little playful and full of anticipation. Ji Tianqing knew that Burial of Heaven had never been emotional. No matter what happened, he was as calm and indifferent as ever. Now, Burial of Heaven actually spoke in such a tone. The big thing he was talking about was obviously not simple. What big thing? Burial of Heaven said with certainty, I can't reveal it for the time being. However, it will be greatly beneficial to you. Perhaps it will let you soar into the sky. Ji Tianqing immediately became vigilant and said in a bad mood, there's no benefit for free. The big thing you're talking about must be a huge risk, right? Buried Heaven said indifferently, smart. I knew it. Ji Tianqing rolled his eyes. Buried Heaven exhorted again, the grand ancestor of 3 absolutes is determined to kill you, so he won't be leaving anytime soon. However, he wouldn't dare barge into the 9th heaven platform. I will continue to heal my injuries. You should seize the time to cultivate your sword soul Dao. I'll tell you what to do once you're done with your seclusion. Ji Tianqing didn't beat around the bush. He simply replied, all right, it's settled then. After that, the two stopped communicating and fell silent. Burial of Heaven continued to recuperate. Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged in the secret room and started to cultivate the 2nd level of the Way of the Sword Soul. The 1st level of the Way of the Sword Soul taught him how to control the power of heaven and earth, how to use his own mana, and how to condense a spirit sword. The 2nd level of the Way of the Sword Soul was of course even more profound and extraordinary. Other than multiplying his mana and increasing the strength of his mana, it could also condense his soul and greatly increase the power of his spirit sword. Most importantly, when the 2nd level of the Way of the Sword Soul was cultivated to a high level, he could use his spirit sword to condense a unique sword domain. Previously, when Ji Tianqing was fighting with Ancestor Sanju also used his spirit sword domain. It was called the 9 Dragon Sword Domain. However, it wasn't the real sword domain. It was an imitation of the sword domain using the spirit eyes and formations. The spirit sword domain derived from the Way of the Sword Soul was the real sword domain. It was unique and unparalleled in the world. After understanding this point, Ji Tianqing was excited. He thought with anticipation, after so long, I've battled so many powerful spirit cultivators. Most of them have condensed their spirit sword domains, which can increase their battle prowess exponentially. If I can condense my sword domain soon, my battle prowess will increase exponentially. How strong will I be then? Therefore, he focused all his attention on comprehending the Way of the Sword Soul. He only wanted to reach the 2nd level of the Way of the Sword Soul as soon as possible. The secret room was dark and silent. Time passed quietly. Unknowingly, 3 days passed. Ji Tianqing understood the Way of the Sword Soul and tried to cultivate it. He cultivated for 2 whole days and tried thousands of times before he finally reached the 2nd level of the Way of the Sword Soul. The vast and boundless golden mana was like a torrential river. It surged violently in his body, making the sound of wind and thunder. Every time he cultivated, he could clearly feel the mana in his body increase by a bit. The power of his spirit was also increasing. The exhilarating feeling of his power increasing made him full of joy and desire. He forgot about the passage of time and focused on cultivating, trying his best to break through to the 6th level of the spirit cultivation realm. Very quickly, 20 days passed. Ji Tianqing cultivated with all his might for 20 days. His mana and strength had increased by 2 times. He was already very close to the 6th level of the spirit cultivation realm. At the same time, the Burial of Heaven had already recovered from its injuries. It was still floating on the 9 heavens platform, crazily devouring the spiritual energy of the sun and moon on the platform to recover its strength. Not only was the Nine Heavens platform dangerous, it was also the place where the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the power of the stars gathered. It was the world's top cultivation holy land. However, if one wanted to cultivate here, they had to be able to withstand the Nine Heavens' divine thunder. Outside the Nine Heavens platform, on the surface of the sea dozens of miles away, old ancestor Sanju was still sitting on the jade cushion, patiently meditating. He had already waited for a month. The anxiety in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. Fortunately, his mana was deep and his mind was as calm as still water. That was why he was able to endure. He kept eliminating the distracting thoughts in his heart and maintained a firm and persistent attitude as he continued to wait. Very quickly, another 5 days passed. There were no changes inside or outside the Nine Heavens platform. It was just as peaceful as before. However, in the sword world, Ji Tianqing had already ended his seclusion and successfully broken through to the 6th layer of the spirit refinement realm. After reaching the 6th layer of the spirit refinement realm, his strength had increased by 2 times. His mana had also become more vigorous, and his bearing had also changed slightly. Right now, he was no longer as domineering as before. His aura was sharp and threatening. His aura had become even more restrained, becoming vigorous and steady. He gave off an invisible, transcendent aura. Of course, this change in aura and bearing would gradually deepen and become more pronounced as his strength increased. After ending his seclusion, Ji Tianqing contacted the Burial of Heaven eagerly. Burial of Heaven, I've already ended my seclusion and successfully broken through to the 6th layer of the spirit refinement realm. Can you tell me what we're going to do now? The Burial of Heaven remained silent. After secretly observing his strength, it said in a deep voice, "Yes, with your current strength, you barely qualify." 1,000 years ago, when Kenshin came to the Nine Heavens platform, it was not just to find a passage to another continent. It was also for the Neptunian divine orb. Moreover, he drew down the divine thunder on the Nine Heavens platform, using the power of the Nine Heavens divine thunder to temper his astral body, refine his mana and soul, and strengthen the power of his sword domain. Chapter 1305. That's right. Burial of Heaven said in a low and solemn voice, "You can also imitate Kenshin and trigger the Nine Heavens divine thunder to temper your body and divine soul. As long as you succeed, your strength will definitely make a qualitative leap, and you can even be said to be invincible under the primordial soul realm." I was right. The more benefits you want, the more dangers you have to bear. Ji Tianqing smiled bitterly, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Although he had long guessed that the big thing Burial of Heaven was talking about must be very dangerous. But he didn't expect it to be so crazy. Burial of Heaven, I'm afraid this big thing can't be done. Let's think about it again. Even an expert like Lu Feiyu was turned into ashes on the spot after being struck by the Nine Heavens divine thunder, and his soul scattered. I still have to trigger the divine thunder? What's the difference between that and seeking death? At that time, before the divine thunder can temper my body and divine soul, I will be turned into charcoal, or even a handful of ashes. Ji Tianqing shook his head repeatedly, decisively rejecting Burial of Heaven's proposal. Burial of Heaven was very calm, and explained unhurriedly, "Tianqing, didn't you always say that riches and honor are found in danger? If you don't go through a difficult test, how can you become a person above others?" Ji Tianqing retorted angrily, "Is this a difficult test? This is not a risk at all, it's completely suicide, okay?" Burial of Heaven was not angry, and said calmly, "Since you met me, when have I ever tricked you? Don't you have even this little bit of trust between us?" Ji Tianqing was speechless, and could only remain silent. Burial of Heaven continued to persuade, "Don't worry, I have thought and weighed this matter repeatedly, and I have a 50% chance of success." 50% chance? Ji Tianqing frowned, and said rather speechlessly, "It sounds like the probability is not small, but isn't it half success and half failure? Live or die?" Burial of Heaven fell silent for a moment before continuing to persuade him. In fact, the nine heavens divine lightning that descended from the nine heavens platform is the divine lightning that an essence soul supremacy would have to withstand when breaking through to the ninth tribulation realm. It's not as terrifying as you imagine. Your corporeal body has been tempered by the sun-moon divine fire, forming the foundation and embryo of the astral divine body. You can be said to be invincible under the primordial spirit realm. Besides, don't you have the lightning Dharma eye? That Dharma eye could also absorb the power of the nine heavens divine thunder, so it would definitely benefit from it. In addition, I will also help you share a portion of the divine lightning's power. I will definitely not let you be killed by the divine lightning. This matter is extremely risky, but the rewards are also astonishing. Think about it carefully. After that, Burial of Heaven didn't say anything else and let Ji Tianqing make the choice. Ji Tianqing pondered in silence for a long time before he finally made up his mind. However, before announcing his decision, he still asked worriedly, Burial of Heaven, back then, Kenshin attracted the divine lightning from the nine heavens platform, and later discovered the passage to Shenwu continent? Burial of Heaven hesitated for a moment before replying, that should be the case. Ji Tianqing felt that its answer was a little forced, but he didn't fuss over it and immediately agreed to the matter. Forget it. In any case, we are trapped in the nine heavens platform and can't escape for the time being. Besides, there's still half a year before Prefecture Lord takes Yunyao out of the profound sky continent. I don't have much time left, so I can only use this method to quickly increase my strength. When Burial of Heaven saw that he had finally agreed, it said in a gratified tone, that's right. It's good that you understand. The greater the pressure, the greater the motivation. Since ancient times, there have been as many martial arts geniuses as there are hairs on a cow, but how many of them can reach the peak of martial arts? Most of the geniuses are overcautious and afraid of death. They don't dare to face death head-on, which is why their achievements are limited. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself with a complicated expression on his face, put yourself in a desperate situation and fight to survive. These words were too apt to describe what he was about to do. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianqing adjusted his state of mind and made all his preparations. He then said, Burial of Heaven, I'm ready. Burial of Heaven hurriedly replied, all right, then let's begin. As soon as it finished speaking, the pitch-black broken sword flashed, and the exit to the sword world opened. Ji Tianqing involuntarily flew out and left the sword world to appear on the nine heavens platform. It was currently noon, and the sky was a clear blue with only a few white clouds floating in it. The nine heavens platform, which had a radius of 5 kilometers, blossomed with a resplendent golden brilliance, making it seem especially divine and gorgeous. The bottomless abyss below the platform was shrouded in gloomy shadows, making it seem extremely mysterious. The 81 tall mountains in the surroundings were like tall and sturdy warriors, forever guarding the nine heavens platform. This was the first time Ji Tianqing saw the nine heavens platform with his own eyes, and he was stunned by the majestic scene. His eyes were filled with admiration. However, in the next instant, his expression changed. The originally clear sky was suddenly filled with wind and clouds, and endless black clouds appeared out of nowhere. The black clouds covered a radius of a few hundred kilometers, and covered the entire nine heavens platform. The nine heavens platform became dark, as if night had fallen. What was even more terrifying was that there were countless arcs of lightning flashing within the black clouds, and they were crazily accumulating lightning energy. A formless and majestic force, as if Mount Tai, was pressing down on Ji Tianqing. He stood on the nine heavens platform, and his body was bent over due to the pressure. His face was pale as he bent over, and all the bones in his body emitted cracking sounds. What a powerful divine power of heaven and earth. The nine heavens divine lightning has not yet descended, and all the bones in my body are about to be crushed. The power of heaven is indeed terrifying. Ji Tianqing stubbornly held on, and he desperately circulated the galaxy body tempering art to dispel the terrifying pressure. At the same time, on the surface of the sea dozens of kilometers away, Elder Sanju, who was meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. He sensed the changes on the nine heavens platform, and he hurriedly stopped circulating his energy. When he saw the black clouds rolling in the sky, and the sky was as dark as night, his expression changed instantly. What's going on? Divine lightning has descended on the nine heavens platform again? Could it be that the divine sword? He muttered to himself, and suddenly, he saw a figure on the nine heavens platform. Although he was very far away, his eyesight was extraordinary, and he could see clearly that it was a handsome young man in a white robe. It was Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing. He is not hiding in the divine sword, and he is actually on the nine heavens platform? Elder Sanju's eyes widened, and an incredulous expression appeared on his face. However, his heart was filled with excitement and ecstasy. Ha ha ha. This is great. Ji Tianqing, that brat, can't continue hiding in the divine sword, and he has finally revealed himself. The nine heavens divine lightning is forming, and he has nowhere to run. He is about to be blasted into ashes by the divine lightning. After he dies, the divine sword will be an ownerless item, and I will have full confidence that I will be able to take the divine sword. Chapter 1306. On the nine heavens platform, black clouds covered the sky and lightning flashed. It was a scene of apocalypse. The lightning arcs in the black clouds only brewed for 3 breaths before they condensed into the ninth heaven's divine thunder. Kaboom! Following a massive explosion that shook the 9 heavens, a massive pillar of purple lightning that was as long as a dragon came crashing down from the black clouds. In that instant, the deafening sound of thunder spread through the sea for thousands of miles. The 81 mountains around the 9 heavens platform and the surrounding hundreds of miles of sea were all shaken. Such a terrifying ninth heaven's divine thunder could really destroy everything. In just a quarter of an instant, the terrifying pillar of lightning struck Ji Tianqing and the sword of burial of heaven. However, the two of them were already prepared. They had accumulated their most powerful strength to welcome the descent of the ninth heaven's divine thunder. The sword of burial of heaven floated above Ji Tianqing's head and was the first to be struck by the ninth heaven's divine thunder. The incomparably violent pillar of lightning sent it tumbling violently. It trembled and buzzed incessantly, and it even flashed with a mysterious black light. Endless lightning arcs wrapped around the broken sword and wantonly invaded the blade, wanting to shatter the sword into pieces. However, the sword of burial of heaven withstood the attack of the lightning. The sword was not damaged, but it was wrapped in dense lightning arcs that would take 10 days to half a month to dissolve. This was the first time Ji Tianqing and the burial of heaven had tried it, so the burial of heaven helped Ji Tianqing bear 70% of the divine thunder's power. When the pillar of lightning struck him, only 30% of its power was left. Even so, the moment he was submerged in the pillar of lightning, he let out a painful groan. His teeth were clenched so tightly that they bled. In that instant, his white robes and clothes, as well as his long hair, were all turned into pitch-black ashes by the lightning. Even his body that had been tempered to the extreme was instantly charred black. He curled up like a shrimp, as if he had been burnt to a crisp. The extremely strong and violent thunder power turned into billions of electric arcs that burrowed into his body like sharp blades and thorns. Every pore of his body, every inch of his flesh, every piece of his marrow, and every piece of his blood were enduring the bombardment and crushing of the divine thunder of the 9 heavens. That kind of extreme pain was as if he was being cut into 108,000 pieces, as if he was being crushed into meat paste or mud. Ji Tianqing was certain that there was nothing more painful than this in the world. Even his divine soul golden sword had been shattered by the lightning, and dense cracks had appeared all over it. His mind was in a blur, and he had lost his 6 senses. His body was completely numb. This was good too. At least he wouldn't feel any pain and wouldn't faint. Boom! An earth-shattering pillar of lightning came crashing down like a flood, enveloping him and slamming him heavily onto the 9 heavens platform. With a deafening muffled sound, the lightning beam also exploded, spreading in all directions. The divine thunder of the 9 heavens shattered, transforming into 990 million purple electric arcs that scattered in the sky for hundreds of kilometers. This area turned into a purple world of lightning. Dense electric arcs floated in the sky, looking extremely gorgeous. At the very least, Patriarch 3 Absolutes was so shocked that his heart raced when he witnessed this scene with his own eyes. Cold sweat broke out all over his body. Oh my God! Ji Tianqing must be in so much pain that he wishes he was dead after being struck by the divine thunder of the 9 heavens, right? However, he was instantly reduced to ashes. He shouldn't feel any pain. The divine thunder of the 9 heavens is so terrifying. I wonder if I can withstand it when I reach the peak of the Essence Soul realm and attempt to break through to the 9th Tribulation realm? Patriarch 3 Absolutes thought that Ji Tianqing was definitely dead, so he didn't think too much about it. He was still considering how he should transcend the tribulation in the future. However, he was dumbfounded the next moment when he saw the situation on the 9 heavens platform. He saw a charred corpse lying on the jade-white 9 heavens platform. The corpse was surrounded by lightning arcs. It didn't shatter and was still very well preserved. What was even more terrifying was that the corpse trembled a few times. It was clearly not dead. He slowly raised his arms and supported his charred body. Then, with great difficulty, he slowly sat up. The most inconceivable scene appeared. He actually assumed a cultivation posture of 5 hearts facing the heavens. Patriarch 3 Absolute's eyes widened as though he had seen a ghost in the day. He roared in horror, "Is he a zombie? No. This is impossible. This isn't real. This is too absurd." Even Lu Feiyu was reduced to ashes by the divine thunder. With Ji Tianqing's strength, how can he survive a bolt of divine thunder? My eyes must be playing tricks on me. It must be. Patriarch 3 Absolutes was shocked and furious. His body trembled as his eyes kept changing. He was about to break down. He couldn't accept this outcome at all and didn't recover for a long time. At the same time, Ji Tianqing was enduring incomparable pain as he sat on the 9 heavens platform and cultivated. Although he wasn't dead, he was only left with his last breath. His fleshly body had been completely destroyed. Every bit of his flesh and bone had been scattered and separated. What he needed to do now was to reassemble his body that had been cut into 108,000 pieces. The burial of heaven was also severely injured. Lightning flashed on the sword and didn't disappear for a long time. Its weak and low voice sounded in Ji Tianqing's mind. It reminded him, "Tianqing, I know you are in so much pain that you want to die. But you must endure it. Hold on. Now is the best time for you to use the power of the divine thunder to refine your soul and reassemble your body." Ji Tianqing didn't answer. He didn't have any more energy to speak. But he remembered the burial of heaven's words. He stubbornly held on with the last breath in his heart and the belief in his soul. He mobilized the remaining magic power in his body bit by bit and started to slowly circulate the galaxy body refining art. Then, he used the miraculous effect of the galaxy body refining art to repair his body bit by bit and reassemble it. At the same time, he also cultivated the sword Soul Dao. He controlled 6 soul magic swords and 1 soul golden sword to gradually refine the power of the divine thunder. He soon entered a state of cultivation and forgot everything outside his body. The 9 heavens platform regained its peace. The dark clouds gradually dispersed and the lightning arcs that filled the sky all disappeared. Time flowed by, and 3 days passed quickly. Ji Tianqing cultivated continuously for 3 days and finally recovered some of his vitality. His life aura was much stronger and his soul power had also recovered by 20%. Moreover, his internal organs, blood vessels, and bone marrow were reorganized by the miraculous effect of the galaxy body refining art. After being refined by the divine thunder of the 9 heavens, his internal organs, blood vessels, and bone marrow were reborn from the destruction and had a wonderful change. Originally, his internal organs and bone marrow were golden. Now, they had a trace of purple and contained the power of thunder. Such an inconceivable result caused Ji Tianqing's spirits to rise, and he became even more impatient to cultivate. Chapter 1307. Ji Tianqing was doing 3 things at once. using the power of the ninth heaven divine thunder to refine his body, spirit, and eyes. Burial of Heaven was not in a hurry to heal his injuries. It was secretly observing his situation, afraid that something would happen to him. After a moment of silence, it said in a low voice, "Tianxing, don't be too greedy. More haste, less speed." Tianxing was cultivating as he replied, "The pain of being struck by the ninth heaven divine thunder is the worst in the world. I don't want to go through it a second time. Of course, I have to finish it in one go." Burial of Heaven said leisurely, "Just now, you only endured 30% of the power of the divine thunder. This cultivation is just to build your foundation." Tianxing was shocked. He said vigilantly, "Burial of Heaven, what do you mean?" Burial of Heaven said calmly, "There will be a second time, a third time." "Are you kidding?" Tianxing's tone had a trace of pain and struggle. Buried Heaven said unhurriedly, "Tempering it once isn't enough to achieve the best effect. After you return to your peak state, you have to refine a few more times until you reach your limit. Moreover, every time you refine, the power of the divine thunder you have to endure will increase by 10%. Kenshin did this back then. He triggered the ninth heaven divine thunder 3 times, and finally refined his body, spirit, and sword realm to perfection. Therefore, when he killed his way to another continent, he was also invincible. Tianxing was silent. Although it was extremely painful to endure the ninth heaven divine thunder, it was simply the most terrifying nightmare. However, his desire for strength was even more important than his life. As early as when he inherited Kenshin's secret technique, he vowed to become a peerless powerhouse like Kenshin. Now, under the guidance of Burial of Heaven, he embarked on Kenshin's path of cultivation. How could he be afraid and retreat? After a while, he said to Burial of Heaven, "I've already been struck by lightning once, so I don't mind being struck a few more times." Seeing that he had agreed, Burial of Heaven didn't say anything else and went to heal himself. Tianxing continued to multitask and cultivated with all his might. The sun and moon rose from the east and set in the west. Day after day passed. Unknowingly, half a month passed. After cultivating for half a month, Tianxing had undergone earth-shaking changes. Originally, he was charred black and covered in cracks. A gust of wind would blow away a lot of black ashes. But now, he had recovered his original appearance. His skin was sparkling like jade, suffused with gold and light purple, appearing extremely mysterious. His physical body was as good as new from the inside out, and it was about 2 times stronger than before. His defense and strength were extremely terrifying. The Divine Soul Golden Sword and the 6 Paths Divine Soul Magic Swords in his mind had also completely recovered. Moreover, both the Golden Sword and the Blazing White Magic Sword contained a faint purple color. Clearly, they had absorbed the divine power of thunder. In addition, the Thunder Dharma eye on his forehead had also undergone a miraculous change. Originally, it was a golden Dharma eye with an azure pupil. The lightning it contained was also azure. Now, the Dharma eye was still golden, but the pupil had become a faint purple color, accumulating terrifying lightning power. Now, Tianxing's physical body was comparable to a half-step essence soul realm cultivator. His magic power and soul had also reached the 9th level of the spirit refinement realm. If he were to face Lu Feiyu again, he could kill him in 3 to 5 moves. Even if he were to face old ancestor Sanju, he could fight for hundreds of rounds without being at a disadvantage. But he wasn't satisfied. These transformations were far from enough. He asked Burial of Heaven about the situation. After learning that Burial of Heaven's injuries had already recovered, he decisively asked for a second round of tempering. Burial of Heaven didn't waste any time and immediately taught him the lightning summoning technique to attract divine lightning. Thus, Tianxing waved his palms and used the lightning summoning technique. 2 giant golden palms slammed onto the 9 heavens platform. Following a muffled bang, white light flashed on the 9 heavens platform. Fierce winds howled in the sky. Endless black clouds appeared out of nowhere and covered the entire 9 heavens platform. In the dense black clouds, lightning arcs flickered violently. It was gathering the divine lightning of the nine heavens. Ji Tianqing stood on the nine heavens platform and looked up at the black clouds and lightning in the sky. He was prepared to welcome the divine lightning. Above the sea, dozens of miles away from the nine heavens platform, old ancestor Sanju was sitting on a praying mat. He was meditating cross-legged and circulating his energy for 1.5 months. In the past month, he had personally witnessed Ji Tianqing being killed by the divine lightning of the nine heavens and miraculously coming back to life. His emotions were incomparably complicated. He was shocked and in disbelief. He only felt that his worldview had been turned upside down. Especially when he found out that Ji Tianqing's injuries were recovering quickly and his strength was increasing explosively. He was so jealous that he wanted to vomit blood. Previously, he had thought that after Ji Tianqing was killed by the divine lightning, he would be able to obtain the divine sword. However, not only did Ji Tianqing not die, but he had also become stronger. This made him lose his patience. There were many times when he could not help but want to charge into the nine heavens platform and kill Ji Tianqing with his own hands. However, he had seen the terrifying power of the nine heavens divine lightning. After weighing the pros and cons for a long time, he finally gave up. After all, he did not have Ji Tianqing's fearless courage. He did not dare to gamble with his own life. He had not lived long enough. Now, the nine heavens platform was once again stirred up. Old ancestor Sanju was immediately awakened. He suddenly opened his eyes and stared at the nine heavens platform. When he saw Ji Tianqing take the initiative to cast a spell and summon the divine lightning of the nine heavens, his expression changed greatly. His expression became incomparably interesting. Heavens! What is that kid doing? Damn bastard! He actually took the initiative to summon the divine lightning. Why is he not afraid of death? Is he tired of living? Old ancestor Sanju was stunned. His eyes widened in disbelief as he let out a cry of surprise. In the next moment, a thunderous boom resounded through the world. Kaboom! A lightning pillar that was thousands of feet long emerged from the dark clouds. It carried a terrifying power that could destroy the world as it struck towards Ji Tianqing. The dark night sky within a few hundred miles was illuminated by the terrifying lightning. Half of the sky was purple. In an instant, the lightning pillar struck the sword of burial of heaven, causing the blade to tremble violently and emit a series of sword cries. The broken sword was enveloped by the purple divine lightning. Dense arcs of electricity curled around the sword. There was also an endless amount of divine lightning that rushed into the sword, destroying the structure of the divine sword. The sword of burial of heaven helped Ji Tianqing block most of the divine lightning. When the lightning pillar struck Ji Tianqing, it still had 40% of its power left. Even so, he repeated the same mistake. He was struck into a pitch-black charcoal just like before. He curled up like a shrimp and crashed heavily onto the nine heavens platform. The lightning pillar struck the nine heavens platform again and instantly exploded, turning into millions of arcs of electricity that spread out. However, what no one noticed was that most of the lightning had entered the nine heavens platform. It seemed to have passed through some lines and patterns, disappearing without a trace. After a long while, the dark clouds that covered the sky gradually dissipated. The purple arcs of electricity that filled the sky also finally disappeared. Chapter 1308. Forefather 3 Absolutes stared at the figure on the nine heavens platform carefully. After being stunned for a moment, he suddenly came back to his senses and came to a realization. I understand now, so that's how it is. Ji Tianqing, that little bastard, he purposely attracted the nine heavens divine lightning to kill me and borrowed the power of the divine lightning to cultivate. My God, isn't this too crazy? Since ancient times, all the experts have feared the lightning tribulation like a tiger. But this brat is actually so fearless that he dares to use the nine heavens divine lightning to temper his body to cultivate. Is this brat still human? Forefather 3 Absolutes was so shocked that his entire body trembled, and his face turned slightly red. He was an expert at the level of a 1,000-year-old demon, and his state of mind was as still as water. There were very few things that could cause his emotions to fluctuate. But ever since he met Ji Tianqing, he had suffered one shock after another. Now, he was almost numb from the shock. He was simply unable to imagine exactly how monstrous Ji Tianqing was to actually be able to do such a crazy thing that shocked the ages. However, he could only watch helplessly. He was completely powerless to stop Ji Tianqing. All he could do was pray silently in his heart, hoping that Ji Tianqing would fail in his cultivation and go berserk. Or, the next time he attracted the 9 heavens' divine lightning, he would be blasted into smithereens. Time passed, and soon, another half a month had passed. This time, Ji Tianqing had the previous experience, and his cultivation was very smooth. Even though he had endured 40% of the divine lightning's power, he still recovered to his peak state in half a month, and completed the tempering of his body, divine soul, and Dharma eye. When he finished cultivating, his body's defense, strength, and toughness had all increased by 2 times. The power of his divine soul had also increased by 2 times, and the power of lightning it contained was more abundant. His lightning Dharma eye had also turned purple, evolving into the divine eye of lightning, which could release terrifying divine lightning. But this was not the end. With the help of the burial of heaven, he began the 3rd tempering. He used the lightning drawing technique again, attracting the 9 heavens' divine lightning. On the 9 heavens platform, black clouds covered the sky, and thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. When the huge divine thunder light beam came down, the sword of burial of heaven was the first to bear the brunt of the divine thunder light beam, taking 50% of the power for him. Ji Tianqing was once again blasted into charcoal and fell heavily to the ground. Unlike before, when he fell to the ground, he was still conscious. Moreover, after the burial of heaven's reminder, he paid special attention to the 9 heavens platform. He saw with his own eyes that the lightning beam exploded into millions of purple lightning arcs that spread out in all directions when it hit the 9 heavens platform. However, most of the lightning energy drilled into the 9 heavens platform and disappeared along the mysterious patterns and lines. He roughly memorized the patterns and lines, and then no longer paid attention to it. A moment later, he struggled to sit up and began his 3rd round of cultivation. When old ancestor Sanju saw this scene in the distant sky above the sea, he had long since become numb from the shock. He saw with his own eyes how Ji Tianqing attracted the divine thunder and used the power of the thunder to cultivate. His strength grew stronger each time. Unfortunately, he was powerless to stop it, and he had nowhere to vent his anger and jealousy. In fact, after he calmed down, he had to consider a problem. Every half a month or so, Ji Tianqing would be killed by the divine thunder, and his strength would increase by several times. If this situation continues, he will cultivate for another month or 2, and his strength will increase by several times. At that time, I will also be helpless against him, and will not be able to snatch the divine sword. No, I have to think of a way to stop him. I can't let him continue to grow stronger. Old ancestor Sanju made up his mind, and racked his brains to think of a way. He tried to use several secret techniques to attack Ji Tianqing on the 9 heavens platform through the formless heaven and earth great formation. However, after he used the secret techniques, the sword lights, dragon shadows, and all kinds of magical attacks disappeared without a trace the moment they entered the 9 heavens platform. Ji Tianqing on the 9 heavens platform was not affected at all. After this method failed, old ancestor Sanju quickly thought of another method. He decided to use his magic treasure to attack Ji Tianqing, and let the magic treasure self-destruct, perishing together with Ji Tianqing. Even if his magic treasure was unable to injure Ji Tianqing, it was not bad that it could attract the divine thunder of the 9 heavens. Ji Tianqing was cultivating in seclusion, and once he was struck by the divine thunder of the 9 heavens, he would die without a doubt. Old ancestor Sanju was full of confidence in this method, so he used all his capital, and did not hesitate to use 2 high-grade soul tools and 1 top-grade soul tool. He used all his strength to cast the technique, and used 3 magic treasures to attack Ji Tianqing. However, the moment the 2 high-grade soul tools entered the 9 heavens platform, they were crushed into pieces by the heaven and earth great formation, and exploded on the spot. The two magic treasures shattered into pieces, and fell into the bottomless abyss below, not even causing a splash. The third top-grade soul tool exploded with a powerful might, and attracted a bolt of divine thunder of the 9 heavens. However, that bolt of divine thunder was only 100 meters long, and was only as thick as a water tank. With a boom, it turned the magic treasure into pieces. Furthermore, this divine lightning appeared out of thin air. There were no dark clouds or gloomy scenes at all. Therefore, Ji Tianqing, who was on the 9 heavens platform, was not affected at all. This result caused old ancestor Sanju to be filled with disappointment and anger, and he almost vomited blood. He was completely helpless, and could not do anything else. However, his heart was filled with hatred, and he was filled with anger and unwillingness. How could he give up like this? He stared at Ji Tianqing's movements while thinking hard, and swore that he would not stop until he killed Ji Tianqing. Time flew, and soon, half a month had passed. Ji Tianqing's third divine thunder body tempering was completed, and his physical body was restored to its original state. This time, his cultivation was even smoother, and he had absorbed a huge amount of divine thunder, and his strength had increased by nearly 3 times. More importantly, he had successfully broken through to the 7th level of the soul refinement realm, and condensed his 7th soul magic sword. In a short 4 months, he had risen by 4 levels, reaching the 7th level of the soul refinement realm. Such a terrifying speed of leveling up was simply shocking and unprecedented. His body, soul, and magic power had all reached the limit of the soul refinement realm, and were comparable to a half-step essence soul realm cultivator. From this moment onwards, he was an invincible existence under the essence soul realm. If he faced old ancestor Sanju again, not only would he be invincible, he would also have a high chance of winning. However, he was not in a hurry to deal with old ancestor Sanju, and first tidied up his appearance. He was not wearing any clothes, and one could clearly see that his skin was sparkling like jade, and contained a faint gold and faint purple color. His long hair had grown out again, and he tied it into a bun, and put on a luxurious jade crown. He stretched his limbs, took out clothes from his interspatial ring, and put on a white robe with cloud patterns. After doing all this, he walked towards the center of the 9 heavens platform, and carefully observed the ground under his feet. He still remembered what the burial of heaven had said, that the 9 heavens platform was the passage to other continents. Chapter 1309. Previously, when Ji Tianqing attracted the divine lightning to strike the 9 heavens platform, he discovered that 80% of the lightning entered the platform. Moreover, the lightning followed the densely packed lines and veined patterns into the 9 heavens platform before disappearing. Those complicated lines and patterns seemed to be some kind of mysterious array to him. However, when he carefully observed the 9 heavens platform, he saw that the ground was as smooth as a mirror. There were no patterns or lines at all. The entire 9 heavens platform was like a perfect piece of natural jade. There was no trace of artificial carving. This made him suspicious and puzzled. The 9 heavens platform is a complete piece of divine stone that floats in the sky. If there is a way to other continents from here, it must be through some kind of array. However, there are no lines or patterns on the platform. How can there be an array? Buried heaven reminded Tianqing when he heard Tianqing mumbling to himself, Tianqing, when the divine thunder penetrated the 9th heaven platform when the thunder beam struck earlier, those lines and veins appeared. Ji Tianqing frowned. After thinking for a while, he asked tentatively, "Do you mean that those lines and patterns do form an array, but they are inside the 9 heavens platform? Furthermore, they must borrow the power of the divine lightning to make the array appear?" Burial of heaven replied calmly, "You can understand it that way." Ji Tianqing nodded and said thoughtfully, "If this hypothesis is true, it means that the power of the divine lightning can enter the 9 heavens platform and even activate the array. It just so happens that I have tempered myself with the divine lightning 3 times. My body and soul contain a vast amount of lightning power. I can give it a try. Therefore, he stood in the middle of the Nine Heavens platform and waved his hands to cast a spell. The hidden lightning power in his body immediately rushed out like a river and gathered between his palms. As he shouted, 2 lightning snakes as thick as an arm shot out from his palms and entered the Nine Heavens platform under his feet. Bang bang. 2 muffled sounds rang out. The 2 lightning snakes immediately exploded and turned into thousands of tiny purple lightning arcs that entered the Nine Heavens platform. Instantly, the jade-like floor of the Nine Heavens platform was dyed with a layer of brilliant purple. Tens of thousands of lightning snakes shuttled back and forth within the Nine Heavens platform, following a specific trajectory. Ji Tianqing stared at the ground and saw the runes and lines appearing once again. Within a radius of 100 meters, there were at least 90,000 lines that formed an ancient and mysterious formation. Although he was very unfamiliar with this array, he could not identify the type of array or its grade. However, he was certain that this 100-meter-wide array formation was only the tip of the iceberg of the entire array formation. What made him even more excited was that he vaguely felt that this formation was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. He seriously recalled for a moment, then his face suddenly changed, and a trace of joy flashed in his eyes. I remember now. It was the divine array in Kenshin's tomb. The array formation on the Nine Heavens platform was very similar to the divine array formation in the Nine Heavens platform. It seems like this array formation is also a true divine array formation. This discovery made Ji Tianqing excited, as if he had seen the hope of deciphering the array formation. However, after he calmed down, he thought of a problem and frowned in disappointment. The array formation on the Nine Heavens platform is also a divine array. I only saw a radius of 100 meters just now. The complete array formation is probably 10 miles wide, occupying the entire Nine Heavens platform. Moreover, with my current strength and knowledge of array formations, it is impossible for me to decipher the divine array formation. It seems like I have to wait until I reach the primordial soul stage before I can decipher this array formation and open the passage to the other continents. When he thought of this, the excitement and anticipation in his heart dissipated. However, the low voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind again. Tianqing, what you need to do is to activate the array formation. Why do you need to decipher it? Ji Tianqing was stunned. He asked in disbelief, as long as I activate the array formation, I can open the passage. Of course. The burial of heaven said with certainty, that array formation is just a teleportation array, not a defensive or trapping array. Why do I need to decipher it? Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. This is much easier. Just now, I only used a little lightning power to make the array formation appear in a radius of 100 meters. If I use all my strength, there is a high chance that I can activate the entire array formation. At this point, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. He asked the burial of heaven, "Oh right, burial of heaven, even if I release all the lightning in my body, it will not be comparable to the Nine Heavens divine thunder. If the Nine Heavens divine thunder blasts down and injects endless lightning into the Nine Heavens platform, won't the teleportation array formation be completely activated?" The burial of heaven said indifferently, if you trigger the Nine Heavens divine thunder, even if the array formation is activated, it will only last for 2 breaths of time. At that time, you will be burnt to a crisp. How will you enter the array formation? Ji Tianqing was relieved. He nodded and said, all right, if this method is not feasible, I will try again. Then, he used all the lightning power in his body again. It turned into 2 pillars of lightning and shot out from his palms into the Nine Heavens platform. Bang! Bang! Along with 2 muffled sounds, 2 thick purple lightning bolts bombarded the Nine Heavens platform. They turned into millions of purple lightning arcs and drilled into the Nine Heavens platform. Soon, the ground within a radius of 100 meters turned a dazzling purple. The dense lightning arcs shuttled back and forth in the Nine Heavens platform, forming tens of thousands of lines and patterns. Ji Tianqing continued to cast spells and inject lightning power into the Nine Heavens platform, causing the purple area on the ground to expand continuously. In just 10 breaths of time, he had released all the lightning power in his body. A quarter of the nine heavens platform within a radius of 10 miles had turned a dazzling purple. In other words, a quarter of the array formation had been activated. However, this was far from enough. Ji Tianqing activated his divine soul magic sword and released even more lightning power into the nine heavens platform. Soon, half of the nine heavens platform had turned a dazzling purple. Tens of thousands of lines and patterns appeared on the ground. Ji Tianqing's energy was rapidly depleting. His face was pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. However, he still gritted his teeth and persevered. He opened the divine eye of lightning on his forehead and released a pillar of lightning into the nine heavens platform. The dazzling purple area was still expanding and spreading in all directions. A majestic ancient divine array had already appeared on the platform and was about to appear. After 20 breaths of time, Ji Tianqing's energy was about to be exhausted. He was so tired that he felt dizzy and was about to collapse. However, only 70% of the nine heavens platform had turned a dazzling purple. His lightning power was still not strong enough to activate the array formation. Damn it! I am still lacking by a little bit. Am I unable to succeed and can only fail? This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he was filled with unwillingness. At this moment, the sword of the burial of heaven also moved. It pointed its sword at the ground, and a violent pillar of lightning shot out from its blade into the nine heavens platform. With the help of the sword of the burial of heaven, dazzling purple lightning spread rapidly and gradually covered the entire nine heavens platform. Ji Tianqing was pleasantly surprised, and he was immediately energized. In just a few breaths of time, dazzling purple lightning arcs finally covered the entire nine heavens platform. The 10 miles divine stone, which was sparkling and translucent just a moment ago, had completely turned a dazzling purple. At this moment, the ancient and mysterious array was finally activated. Swoosh! Chapter 13:10. When the 30-meter tall and 10-meter wide door appeared, Ji Tianqing was incomparably excited. The tall and majestic divine thunderbolt door was a dazzling purple. Purple lightning curled around the door frame and lintel, as if dragons and snakes were slithering about. Inside the door was a purple whirlpool that led to an unknown place, making it seem extremely mysterious. Tianqing, you only have 2 breaths of time. Don't hesitate and quickly go in. The burial of heaven's voice rang out in Ji Tianqing's mind, sounding somewhat urgent. Ji Tianqing was already exhausted, and his entire body was sore and weak. Even taking a single step was difficult for him. When he heard the burial of heaven's urging, he still hesitated for a moment. After all, he still had worries in his heart. If I pass through this divine thunderbolt door and really reach Shenwu continent, how will I return? He still had friends and family on the Tianxian continent, and there were still many things that he had not finished. The demon emperor was not dead, and the demon army was still attacking the 3 races, causing chaos in the world. The ancestral demon god was about to awaken and be reborn, and when that time came, he would definitely sweep across the world and plunge the world into misery and suffering. If he left the Tianxian continent and stepped onto another continent, he would be safe and could even start a new journey on the martial path. But what about his friends and family? Who would resolve the crisis of the human race? Who would be able to resist the impending calamity? At this moment, many thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. He was not a saint, and he definitely would not take on the responsibility of saving the world. However, there were too many people and things that he could not let go of. How could he so easily cut off his emotions and desires and become carefree? At this moment, the burial of heaven's voice rang out once more. Tianqing, don't hesitate anymore. Trust me. Ji Tianqing also knew that this was a rare opportunity, and he would regret it if he missed it. Thus, he hurriedly erupted with the last of his strength and desperately rushed towards the divine thunderbolt door that was 100 steps away. In just 2 breaths of time, he had crossed the distance of 100 steps like a gust of wind and rushed into the door with all his might. Whoosh! His figure was submerged in purple lightning, and he instantly disappeared without a trace. Almost at the same time as he charged into the divine thunderbolt gate, the 2 breaths of time ended. The entire divine thunderbolt array naturally dissipated, and the divine gate also disappeared into thin air. The 9 heavens platform regained its calm, and the dazzling purple lightning that covered the ground also disappeared without a trace. It was as if nothing had happened. Dozens of miles away from the 9 heavens platform, Old Ancestor 3 Absolute still hadn't left. He was still sitting in the air above the sea. Just now, when Ji Tianqing had used the power of thunder and activated the divine thunderbolt formation, he had seen everything clearly. He had personally witnessed Ji Tianqing's strength increase explosively. He had even released boundless lightning and opened a divine gate of lightning. He didn't quite understand what Ji Tianqing was doing. However, he was filled with shock and disbelief. He opened his mouth silently and did not come back to his senses for a long time. It wasn't until a long time later that a cold sea breeze blew over that he shivered and woke up from his shock. No. Ji Tianqing had a problem. He used the divine thunderbolt to temper his body. Not only did he become extremely powerful, he could also control the power of thunder. Just now, he seemed to have used the power of thunder to open some kind of array and condense a gate of light. Then, he passed through the divine thunderbolt gate and disappeared along with the lightning. It's really strange. What is that kid trying to do? Where did he go after passing through that gate? Could it be that he escaped from under my nose just like that? Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes frowned and muttered to himself angrily. He couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he thought. His heart was filled with hatred and killing intent, as well as deep shock and doubt. However, he still remained calm and focused on thinking. He analyzed all kinds of clues and wanted to find the truth. Legend has it that the 9 heavens platform not only has great danger and terror, but also great opportunities and fortuitous encounters that can allow one to reach the heavens in a single step. Ji Tianqing had to endure the divine thunderbolt's attack, which was extremely dangerous and terrifying. However, after passing through the divine thunderbolt gate, he mysteriously disappeared. Could it be that he obtained a great opportunity? When he thought of this, Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was burning with jealousy and was about to go crazy. It would be fine if he didn't know about this, but it happened right under his nose. He watched with his own eyes but was powerless to stop it. How could he not be angry to the point of vomiting blood? After hesitating for a while, he finally made up his mind. No. With my strength and methods, I can't stop Ji Tianqing, let alone unravel the secret of the 9 heavens platform. Now that he and that divine sword have disappeared, I can't get it anymore. Since I can't get it, then I must destroy him and that divine sword. At this point, Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes revealed a cold smile, and his eyes became ferocious and bloodthirsty. I'm going to inform that person. As an Essence Soul Realm expert, he will definitely be interested in the divine sword and the 9 heavens platform. With that, he took out a communication jade slip from his interspatial ring. After inputting a message into the jade slip, he released it. Whoosh! The communication jade simplified into a spiritual light and flew high into the sky, disappearing. After sending the message, Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes waited with a cold smile on his face, watching the 9 heavens platform closely. At the same time, Ji Tianqing saw a blur in front of his eyes, and he arrived in a foreign space. That's right, it was a space, not a continent or a world. The scene that he saw was completely different from what he had imagined. Beneath his feet and all around him was darkness. There was nothing there, just a pitch-black and cold void. There was neither air nor spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the void. There were no living creatures in the void. The extremely cold temperature could freeze a soul-level Dharma treasure into powder and instantly freeze a soul refinement realm expert to death. Only Essence Soul Realm experts who had surpassed the soul refinement realm could survive in this void. Fortunately, although Ji Tianqing was not in the Essence Soul realm, he was comparable to a half-step Essence Soul Realm expert. Moreover, his body and soul had been tempered by the 9 heavens divine thunder and were unimaginably powerful. He could move freely in the void, but he could not stay there for too long. The dermic powers in his body were being depleted at a rapid rate. According to his estimation, he could last for at most 10 days in the void before exhausting all his dermic powers. At that time, only death would await him. Understanding this, he remained calm and collected, observing the scene around him. It didn't take long for him to make out that this void was like a huge and long canyon, but it also looked like a wide crack. A crack in the void? I thought that after passing through the divine thunderbolt gate, would reach the Shenwu continent. Ji Tianxing muttered in disappointment and quietly analyzed. The burial of heaven once said that the continents in this world were sealed by the gods and were not connected to each other. However, after tens of thousands of years, the seals between the continents have loosened, and cracks have appeared. If that's the case, then this huge and narrow void is the crack in the god's seal? As this thought flashed through his mind, the burial of heaven's deep voice rang out in his mind. Your guess is correct, but it's not accurate enough. Chapter 13:11. Ji Tianxing only had 10 days. After 10 days, his power would be exhausted, and his life would be in danger. In order to conserve his magic power, he stepped on the burial of heaven's sword and flew in the void. After observing, he found that this crack in the sky was at least 10,000 miles wide. As for the length of the crack, it seemed to be endless. After 4 hours, he had flown for tens of thousands of miles in the dark void. At this moment, he suddenly saw that in the darkness ahead, there was a light. Looking from afar, it seemed to be a gigantic ball of light, like a bright moon. However, that ball of light was not white, but blue with green and yellow light. It was a riot of colors. What is that? Ji Tianxing's spirit was shaken. His eyes were filled with doubt and anticipation. No one could answer him, and the burial of heaven was also silent. He sped up and flew over, wanting to get closer to see what was going on. This crack in the sky, and everything in the void, was unfamiliar and mysterious to him. He flew on his sword for half a day before arriving at the gigantic ball of light. When he got closer, he could see clearly that it was a circular ball of light with a radius of 1,000 miles. The gigantic ball of light was rotating slowly, and it constantly flashed with dense brilliance. Ji Tianxing stopped and carefully observed the ball of light. He saw that there were many patterns on the surface of the ball of light, which were made up of 3 colors, blue, green, and dark yellow. The blue patterns were the most numerous, occupying about 60% of the entire ball of light. The dark yellow patterns were next, occupying about 30% of the ball of light. The remaining 10% of the ball of light was mostly green patterns. The patterns made up of these 3 colors divided the ball of light into more than a dozen areas of various sizes. Ji Tianxing looked up at the ball of light, and after a moment of observation, he suddenly thought of something and came to a realization. I understand now. The patterns on this ball of light seem to be a topographic map. The blue areas represent the ocean, the dark yellow areas represent the land, and the green areas are forests. After understanding this, he frowned even more suspiciously. At least 60% of the entire map is the ocean, and the other 30% of the land is also divided into 5 pieces, like 5 islands. Where is this map from? The ruins of the Eastern Sea? Or the profound sky continent? He pondered for a long time but still couldn't figure it out. A bold idea vaguely appeared in his mind, but he didn't dare to confirm it. At this moment, he suddenly saw that the huge ball of light floating above his head had become extremely dazzling. Furthermore, the pitch-black void on both sides of the sky fissure lit up with a silvery white brilliance. The dazzling silver-white light hung in the void like a 1,000-mile-tall light screen. The curtain of light continued to extend forward, as if it was endless. It was like a silver beam of light, tearing apart the pitch-black void. Ji Tianxing flew forward on his sword, but his eyes were fixed on the huge screen of light. The silver light screen flowed slowly like flowing water, and a vast image appeared in it. The first thing that entered his eyes was a green scene. In the picture was a vast grassland. The ground was covered with waist-high green grass, as well as all kinds of small flowers and trees. At the end of the vast grassland stood an ancient city. There was a moat around the city, and under the tall city gate, there were armored soldiers guarding it. On the majestic city wall, there were not only guards, but also ballistas and catapults. As Ji Tianqing flew forward, he saw the picture flowing and changing slowly. He saw the scene in the city again. There were countless commoners and merchants in plain clothes moving about in the city. There were many martial artists with swords and sabers on their backs moving about in the city. Ji Tianqing felt that this scene was somewhat familiar. He continued to fly forward for more than 1,000 miles and saw many similar scenes. There were more than a dozen cities, dozens of mountains, and the ground in front of him. He sharply discovered that the scenes in the mountains and cities were very similar to the scenes in the central state. The commoners in the picture were dressed in the style of the central state, and the architectural style of the houses in the city was exactly the same as the central state. Next, he continued to fly on his sword in the void. The silver light screen was endless, and the scenes in it were also flowing and changing slowly. He also saw many scenes of different styles. There were bleak deserts, dark brown barren mountains, and countless rugged buildings and cities. There were many demons wearing animal skins and bones as decorations. Without a doubt, these scenes were of the Western Baron Demon clan. There was a white world of ice and snow, many mountains covered in pure white snow, and some tall demons with dark or dark purple skin appeared in the picture. These were the scenes of the Northern Desert Demon clan. When he saw this, Ji Tianqing had already flown tens of thousands of miles in the void. Although he was extremely shocked, he had to confirm his previous guess. That's right, these scenes were the scenes of the Tianxian land. He was finally sure that the topographic map on the giant light ball should be a miniature of the entire world. Previously, he thought that there were 5 islands on the map. Now, he realized that they were not islands, but 5 continents. This way, that giant light ball is a miniature of the entire world. The topographic map on the light ball corresponds to the topography of the entire world. In this world, 60% of the area was ocean, 30% was land, and it was divided into 5 vast continents. The Tianxian land is just one of the 5 continents, and it's located in a corner of the world. Of the 5 continents, the middle one is the largest, and it's twice as large as the Tianxian land. Could the largest continent be the legendary Shenwu continent? Ji Tianqing was filled with shock, and he gained a new understanding of this world. At the same time, he also understood that this world was actually a planet, and the endless ocean and the 5 continents were all on this planet. This is too inconceivable. Even a primordial spirit realm cultivator would be trapped on a continent and unable to leave, let alone a spirit refinement realm cultivator. Who could overlook the entire world and treat it as a planet, overlooking the endless ocean and the 5 continents? Apart from the gods, who else could have such lofty vision and astounding courage? That light ball is definitely a miracle. Ji Tianqing had known for a long time that a martial artist's martial path was actually a process of understanding the world and becoming one with it. The stronger a martial artist was, the deeper their understanding of the world and the heavens would be. Only a powerhouse who had reached the deity realm could transcend this world and explore the endless galaxies. He had not yet reached the primordial spirit realm, but he had already come into contact with too many secrets and had a deep understanding of the entire world. Chapter 13:12. Ji Tianqing controlled the sword of burial of heaven and continued to fly forward in the void. After a whole day, he finally finished watching the scene of the Tianxian continent. Then, a strange scene appeared on the huge light screen. It was a vast and boundless continent. There was a primitive forest that had existed for tens of millions of years. In it stood towering ancient trees that were thousands of meters tall. Dark blue-green wood genuine qi was steaming. In the forest, there were mountain-like shrubs and vines that had lived for tens of millions of years and turned into demons. They entrenched themselves in the forest like living creatures, capturing birds and beasts for food. There were also many strange and huge beasts that shuttled back and forth in the forest like lightning. There was a giant python that was thousands of meters tall that was about to turn into a dragon after devouring the essence of the moon. There was an ancient giant beast the size of a mountain that could crush a mountain peak with one step and break a river with two palms. It was earth-shattering. There were also giant birds that could cover the sky and the sun when they spread their wings. They glided across the sky and brought up hurricanes that destroyed hundreds of miles of forest. There were birds and beasts of various colors and shapes. They all had the power to summon the wind and rain and fight the sun and moon. They were unimaginably powerful. After passing through the forest, there was a vast and endless mountain range. Each mountain range was hundreds of millions of miles long. Among them, there were giant peaks that were tens of thousands of meters tall that were shrouded in white clouds and thick fog. Countless powerful demons and beasts shuttled and chased each other between the mountains. Above the vast clouds, there were many ancient and majestic cities built on the peaks of the mountains. Those cities were built on the mountains. The terrain was steep and contained a domineering aura that overlooked the world. The architectural style of the city was also very special. It had a very ancient and sacred aura. There were almost no weak mortals living in the city. Basically, all of the people living in the city were martial artists. Most of the martial artists had amazing strength. They could lift thousands of kilograms of boulders and logs with one hand. Even if these martial artists were not in the sky origin stage, they were not far from it. All the ancient cities were located on the peaks of the mountains and were not connected to each other. Those people came and went with each other. Some of them used vital essence to form wings and flew in the sky like birds. Some of them sat on various flying artifacts. Some were like boats, some were like flying boats, and some were like roulette wheels. However, what Ji Tianqing saw the most was a flying Dharma artifact that was similar to a throne. He flew continuously for 30,000 miles, and this was all he saw. His heart was filled with shock and astonishment. He was certain that the continent in the picture was not the Tian Xian land. On the Tian Xian land, it was rare to see such gigantic and valiant demonic birds and beasts, not to mention such ancient and majestic mountaintop cities. But for the time being, he still couldn't tell which continent it was. Therefore, he patiently continued to fly forward, carefully observing the scene on the screen. One after another, new and unfamiliar scenes appeared clearly in front of his eyes. 8 snow-white single-horned heavenly horses with wings were pulling a luxurious golden carriage with a radius of 100 meters, flying across the sky at lightning speed. The golden carriage was extremely luxurious. It was completely golden and resplendent, and it emitted a divine and dignified aura. It didn't seem like something from the mortal world at all. Around the golden carriage, there were hundreds of beautiful young women. They were either carrying baskets of flowers or various musical instruments. Along the way, fresh flowers floated in the air, and string music played together. When the sacred golden carriage flew to the mountaintop and arrived above an ancient city, the hundreds of thousands of people in the city all knelt down and bowed in worship. Their attitudes were extremely respectful and pious. Within the golden carriage, there was a white jade arm waving her slender hand. A resplendent golden light scattered in the ancient city. Instantly, the ancient city was filled with dazzling golden light, as if it had turned into a perfect golden world. On the ground, spring grass sprouted, green trees bloomed, and all kinds of spiritual herbs grew wildly. Hundreds of spiritual beasts also grew rapidly. The hundreds of thousands of martial artists and civilians cheered as if they were bathed in the spring breeze. Subtle changes occurred to their bodies, and their strength was greatly increased. Originally, in the towering mountains below the ancient city, there were tens of thousands of demonic beasts gathered. However, when the golden light that covered the sky scattered and spread among the mountains, it instantly drove away countless demonic beasts, causing them to retreat in fear. Those who didn't dodge in time and were touched by the resplendent golden light, would collapse and disintegrate. Not long after, this image dissipated. Next, Ji Tianqing witnessed many hair-raising, thrilling, and bizarre scenes with his own eyes. Two valiant experts with powerful and noble auras were fighting each other in the sky. Both of them didn't use Dharma treasures, but with a raise of their hands, they captured dozens of mountains and used them as hidden weapons to attack each other. The shockwaves from the battle turned the land within 1,000 miles into ruins. Countless rivers collapsed and changed their course. Even with a wave of their sleeves, endless heavenly fire poured down and scorched the mountains and rivers within 1,000 miles. Such a hair-raising battle and the earth-shaking power of the Dharma spells shocked Ji Tianqing greatly. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Heavens, just how terrifying is the strength of these two powerhouses? Even primordial soul realm supremes may not be able to destroy thousands of miles of land with a raise of their hands like this, right?" Having seen too many similar scenes, he was already a little numb from the shock. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind. This continent is even more vast than the Tianxian continent. The terrain is even more lofty and steep, and the cities are even more ancient. The birds, beasts, and ordinary people here are several times stronger than those on the Tianxian continent. There are even many warriors who have surpassed the primordial soul realm. It seems that these scenes are of the Shenwu continent. I haven't even entered the Shenwu continent, but I'm already able to see the scene of the Shenwu continent through that ball of light and the two screens. It's too amazing. Ji Tianqing was both shocked and excited. He was filled with anticipation for the vast, mysterious, and powerful Shenwu continent. Ever since he had learned of its existence, his goal had been to enter the Shenwu continent. This was because the burial of heaven had said that the 5 continents of this world had all sorts of seals and shackles. Only on the Shenwu continent would one not be restricted, and there would be a chance for one to reach the deity realm. However, that chance was very slim, and there were only a handful of warriors who could reach the deity realm. Still, it was better than being trapped on the Tianxian continent without any hope of ever becoming a deity. Ji Tianqing knew that there would come a day when he would enter the Shenwu continent and pursue the deity realm. Thus, he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to understand the situation of the Shenwu continent in advance. Thus, he tirelessly flew on his sword into the depths of the void, constantly watching the scenes on the screens along the way. For 3 whole days, millions of images appeared on the screens, all of which were bizarre and variegated. It wasn't until the 4th day that the images on the screens changed to that of another continent. The scenes on this continent were completely different from the Shenwu continent, and they were also very different from the Tianxian continent. Chapter 13:13. Over the next 2 days, Ji Tianqing saw images of another continent. This continent's topography was very peculiar, and most of the land was covered in forests. All sorts of strange intelligent races lived in the forests, and they built all sorts of cities and houses, creating a prosperous civilization. However, after observing for half a day, Ji Tianqing discovered that although this continent's landscape was peculiar, it was still as ordinary and low-level as the Tianxian continent. Most of the creatures living on this continent were ordinary people. Spirit refinement realm powerhouses were the peak, and primordial spirit realm powerhouses were considered supreme. Because of this, Lu Yin no longer had any interest in observing the 5th continent. In any case, he already had a rough idea of the situation in this world. Aside from the Shenwu continent, which was the largest continent and where the martial path was the most prosperous, the other 4 continents, including the Tianxian continent, were rather backward and ignorant. After all, these continents had been sealed by the gods and were shackled by invisible shackles. All in all, Ji Tianqing had his own thoughts and came to a conclusion. Although this world is vast and boundless, the 4 continents are very ordinary. Only the Shenwu continent is the most prosperous, and there's hope of reaching the deity realm. It's not just the Tianxian continent. The powerhouses of the other 4 low-level continents probably want to leave their own continents and enter the Shenwu continent to pursue the peak of the martial path. Now that he had a goal to strive for, he no longer considered this problem. This was because he had unknowingly fallen into a predicament. There was a problem that he needed to solve as soon as possible. I've already been in the heavens fissure for 6 days, and I'll have at most 4 or 5 more days before my strength is exhausted. At that time, I won't be able to survive in the void. But where should I go from here? Should I take this opportunity to enter the Shenwu continent or return to the Nine Heavens platform? If I want to go to the Shenwu continent, where should I go? If I want to return to the Nine Heavens platform, can I go back the way I came? Many questions filled his mind, causing him to frown. Unfortunately, the burial of heaven had remained silent, and Lu Yin did not know what it was doing or what it was thinking. After pondering for a while, he could only make a decision. There's nothing in the void besides that ball of light and the two screens. If I want to enter this place, it's most likely related to the ball of light and the screens. I'll give it a try first. Thus, he controlled the sword of burial of heaven and flew toward the light screen. An hour later, he came to the mysterious and dazzling light screen and observed it closely. On the dazzling light screen, the image of an ordinary continent was still being displayed, and it was slowly moving. After careful observation, Ji Tianqing discovered that the light curtain was formed by silver flowing light, as if a water curtain was pouring down from above. He tried to reach out his right hand and condensed a golden palm to touch the silver light screen. As a result, as soon as the golden palm touched the light screen rippled like water, and many ripples spread out in all directions. The image on the light screen also became blurry. When the ripples dissipated, the light screen returned to normal, and a new image appeared. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing suddenly frowned and said with some disappointment, "Such a mysterious light curtain, but I can't see any trace of a formation, let alone understand the mystery." It seemed that it was impossible to leave the void through the light screen. At least, with my current strength and experience, I can't do it. He muttered to himself and frowned as he stared at the light screen, somewhat distressed. At this moment, he suddenly discovered that the light screen rippled again, and circles of ripples spread out. The image that had just appeared on the light screen was suddenly disrupted and became blurry. I haven't touched the light screen yet, why is this happening? He immediately revealed a look of surprise and stared at the light screen full of ripples, waiting to see what would happen. In the next moment, he saw with his own eyes that the image on the light screen had completely disappeared. The light screen in a radius of 1,000 meters became abnormally calm, like a transparent mirror. Through this huge mirror, he saw that behind the mirror, there was a throne gilded with spiritual jade. The throne was very spacious, and it was in the shape of a semicircle, more than 6 meters wide. The throne was like a half moon, and its shape was very exquisite and beautiful. It was dazzling with gold and jade, and it exuded a noble and sacred aura. Ji Tianqing was certain that even the thrones of Emperor Golden Dragon and a human imperial lord weren't as noble and gorgeous as this throne. He couldn't imagine how many rare treasures had been used to create such a sacred throne. What realm did the craftsman who made this throne reach? Most importantly, what kind of strength and realm was worthy of this throne? Ninth Tribulation Realm? Sage Realm? Or a deity realm expert? With these questions in mind, his gaze landed on the throne as he carefully observed it. Then, when he saw the figure sitting on the throne, he was dumbfounded. This was because the figure sitting on the throne was actually a petite little girl. The girl's figure and appearance were very similar to humans. She was about 1 meter tall and wore a red dress. She was sitting leisurely on the throne with her bare feet and calves. Her face was fair and tender, and it was as red as an apple. Her palm-sized face was round and looked extremely cute. One couldn't help but want to reach out and pinch it. Her mouth was petite and pink, and her nose was small and cute. However, she had a pair of extremely clear and clean eyes. She was a little different from humans. Her long hair was pale golden, and she wore hair clips and hair accessories. Her pupils were also golden. However, it was undeniable that this was an extremely beautiful little girl that anyone would love. She was just too cute. Ji Tianqing dared to swear that this little girl was definitely not more than 10 years old. She was only 8 or 9 years old. He would never have imagined that on such a sacred and honorable throne, there was actually an 8 or 9-year-old little girl sitting there. This was simply too shocking. When Ji Tianqing stared at the little girl with his mouth agape, the little girl also widened her clear and bright eyes and stared at him through the mirror. Their eyes met, and both of them were stunned. They sized each other up with strange gazes. Moments later, Ji Tianqing came to his senses and greeted the little girl first. "This, little girl, hello. May I know who you are?" He was a little hesitant and embarrassed. He didn't know how to address the other party, nor did he know if the other party could understand his language. After he finished speaking, he discovered an even more awkward problem. Although he and the little girl were facing each other, and they were only 5 steps away from each other, there was a mysterious barrier between them. The two of them were separated by a mysterious mirror-like screen of light. Their voices couldn't be transmitted. "I didn't expect to meet someone else in the rift. I was so excited that I forgot about this." Ji Tianqing immediately blushed with shame as he smiled awkwardly at the little girl. Chapter 13-14. Seeing that the little girl finally responded, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but smile. In particular, the little girl's eyes were clear and pure, full of innocence, which warmed his heart. Even though he had never met the little girl before, but as the saying goes, one's appearance was born from one's heart. Such a cute little girl couldn't be a bad person. Moreover, there was a mysterious light screen between the two of them. He pondered silently, thinking about how to communicate with the little girl. He really wanted to know, on the other side of the mysterious light screen, where was the little girl's space? Which race was the little girl? Which continent was she from? Why was she here? He quickly thought of a way, using his hands to make different gestures, and matched them with specific body movements, to communicate with the little girl. Unfortunately, the little girl couldn't understand his body language at all, and was even amused by his slightly comical appearance, giggling. Seeing the little girl giggling, Ji Tianqing felt even more awkward, and hurriedly stopped. At this time, the little girl stopped giggling, slowly stretched out her small white hand, and pressed it on the mysterious light screen. When her palm touched the light screen, it was as if she was pressing on water, and layers of ripples appeared around her palm. Then, she stared at Ji Tianqing, and gestured with her other hand. Ji Tianqing immediately understood what she meant, and slowly stretched out his right hand, and pressed it on the mysterious light screen. Suddenly, an invisible mysterious force wrapped around his palm. That force was a little cold, but it was undeniably powerful, like the majesty of a god, and couldn't be resisted. Ji Tianqing was puzzled. What was the little girl trying to do? In the next moment, he felt a slight warmth in his palm, and when he looked, he realized that the little girl's chubby little hand had touched his palm. 2 palms, one big and one small, were tightly pressed together. Then, an invisible soul fluctuation came from the little girl's palm, and a cute child's voice sounded in Ji Tianqing's mind. "Young hero, may I ask where you are from, and where are you going?" Without a doubt, this was the little girl's soul transmission. Her voice was as clear and cute as a 9-year-old girl's. However, her tone was slightly solemn, and her words also had a kind of ancient and experienced charm. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment. Obviously, he was not used to a little girl talking to him in such an elder tone. In his opinion, the other party was like a child pretending to be mature, making him unable to restrain his laughter. However, after staring at the little girl for a while, he realized that the little girl was looking at him expectantly. Her expression was quite serious, and she didn't seem to be joking. Therefore, he also answered seriously, "I came from the Tianxian land and accidentally entered this place. I don't know how to get out." When the little girl heard his soul transmission, she immediately pouted and frowned. She said with some displeasure, "Humph, you're lying. The fluctuations of your soul have betrayed your heart. You clearly intended to break into this place and explore some secrets." Ji Tianqing's body suddenly shook, and he asked in disbelief, "Hey, you can actually pry into other people's minds? So you admit that you're lying?" The little girl's lips curled into a mocking smile, with a hint of slyness. It was only then that Ji Tianqing realized that the little girl was trying to trick him. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he said, "Little girl, it's fate that we were able to meet here. Can't you treat me with sincerity, less tricks, and more sincerity? The little girl immediately giggled. You're really interesting. Ji Tianqing only smiled and did not reply. The little girl took the initiative to ask, right, what kind of place is the Tianxian land? The Tianxian land is located in a very distant place, and it's surrounded by oceans. Ji Tianqing gave a simple explanation before asking, what about you? Where are you from? The little girl roughly understood what he meant, and she replied sincerely, me? I come from the Shenwu continent's Taihao divine kingdom, and I'm a citizen of the martial god Taihao. When he heard this, Ji Tianqing's expression changed, and his eyes revealed a look of astonishment. Shenwu continent? She really is from the Shenwu continent. No wonder the throne she's sitting on is so similar to the flying treasures of the Shenwu continent. As this thought flashed through his mind, his emotions became somewhat agitated, and he hurriedly asked, little girl, I've only heard of the legends of the Shenwu continent, but I've never seen it for myself. Can you tell me what the Shenwu continent is like? Also, what's the deal with the Taihao divine kingdom and the martial god Taihao? The little girl pouted and frowned slightly. I'm much older than you, and I have a name. Don't call me little girl. In order to have a smooth conversation, Ji Tianqing decided to ignore the first half of her sentence and asked seriously, then I haven't asked, what's your name? The little girl revealed a warm smile and replied with some pride, my name is Jiao. What's your name? My name is Tianqing. Ji Tianqing answered the question honestly and then curiously asked, why are you called Jiao? Is there a surname like Jiao? Jiao did not seem to like this question and pouted at him. My surname isn't Jiao. It's just that I'm ranked 99 in my family, so I'm called Jiao. You're ranked 99 in your family? Ji Tianqing was stunned on the spot, and he said with a heart full of shock, then you must have a lot of siblings. Jiao nodded and agreed. Yes, I have a total of 99 siblings, and I'm the youngest one. Fortunately, my mother told me that 99 would be as good as one's wishes, and she didn't want to have any more children. Otherwise. Halfway through her sentence, Jiao seemed to be afraid of spilling the beans, so she did not continue. Even so, Ji Tianqing still understood what she was saying, and he immediately felt deep admiration for Jiao's parents. This couple had been able to give birth to 99 children. They were truly powerful. Jiao could tell that he was thinking nonsense, and she pouted unhappily. Hey, Tianqing, you're not allowed to think nonsense, and you're not allowed to make fun of me. Yes, of course not. Ji Tianqing hurriedly nodded with a serious expression as he guaranteed her. Jiao finally relaxed and continued, since you've never been to Shenwu continent, I'll give you a rough idea. Shenwu continent is vast and boundless. I've traveled all over the continent since I was young, but I haven't explored the entire continent yet. There are 3 divine kingdoms on the continent, the boundless divine kingdom, the absolute heaven divine kingdom, and the Luoshui divine kingdom. These 3 kingdoms have existed for nearly 10,000 years. All of the living beings on the continent are under the jurisdiction of these 3 divine kingdoms. The 3 kingdoms restrict each other, but they also assist each other. In short, it's very complicated. Of the 3 divine kingdoms, the safest and most harmonious one is our boundless divine kingdom. Chapter 13-15. When Jiao mentioned martial god Taihao, her face was filled with reverence and admiration, and all sorts of praises flowed endlessly. Ji Tianqing's teeth ached as he listened, and he thought to himself, although the legendary martial god is revered and admired, it shouldn't be this exaggerated, right? This Jiao must be a fanatic worshipper of martial god Taihao. After Jiao finished speaking, he revealed a polite smile and praised, hearing you speak so sincerely, it seems that martial god Taihao is a great talent of his generation and a benevolent ruler. Jiao puffed out her chest proudly and nodded repeatedly. Of course. Father. Everyone knows of the martial god's fame. Ji Tianqing hurriedly changed the topic and asked, what about Tianzhu and Luoshui god nations? Jiao lost interest in these two god nations and only gave a brief introduction. Tianzhu nation is in the eastern region, and its master is martial god Tianzhu. It's said that he's the most handsome man in the world and is extremely proud and mysterious. As for Luoshui god nation, it's in the northern region of the continent, and its master is martial god Luoshui, who is known as the most beautiful woman in the world. The most handsome man in the world? The most beautiful woman in the world? Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, and his expression became a little strange. He muttered to himself, could it be that to become a martial god and rule a god nation, one has to look at one's appearance? When he thought of this, he couldn't help but look down at himself and think to himself, with my appearance, I might have a chance in the future. At this time, Jiao saw that he was distracted and asked, Tianqing, I've already said so much and told you the truth about the Xinwu continent. You have to be honest and tell me why you're here. Why did you barge into Xianpin Gate? Xianpin Gate? Ji Tianqing frowned, puzzled by this unfamiliar term. Jiao nodded and said seriously, the grain god did not die because of Xianpin. Xianpin Gate is the root of heaven and earth, and it doesn't need to be used frequently. This is a legend from ancient times, and you won't understand the specifics. All you need to know is that the Xianpin Gate is talking about this place. After saying that, she pointed at the dark void behind her and the mysterious light screen between them. Ji Tianqing nodded as if he understood, and explained, I was originally a martial artist from the profound sky continent. I was limited by the shackles of heaven and earth, and even though I had exceptional talent for cultivation, I had no hope of reaching the peak of martial arts. Thus, I searched with all my might, traversing the entire continent before I found a dangerous place. I risked my life to enter this place because I wanted to find a way to leave the Tianxian continent and enter the Xinwu continent. Jiao listened very seriously. Her big clear eyes were filled with surprise. She said in disbelief, you actually know these secrets? How did you know? I can't tell you that. Ji Tianqing shook his head and looked at her apologetically. Jiao did not blame him, and she simply nodded in understanding. It's fine if it's not convenient for you to reveal this information. Also, if you want to enter the Xinwu continent, you'll have to go through this screen. When you see the scene of the Xinwu continent on the screen, you'll be able to enter. However, you'll need to reach the primordial spirit realm before you can enter, or else you'll be turned to dust. Also, you must look carefully before you enter. If you end up in the territories of the Heaven End Divine Nation or the Luoshui Divine Nation, you'll be all alone. After saying that, she gave Ji Tianqing a kind smile. Ji Tianqing understood what she meant, and he smiled. Jiao, you mean, you're willing to be friends with me? You want me to go to the Taihao Divine Nation when I enter the Xinwu continent? Jiao nodded, and her big clear eyes revealed a look of admiration. That's right. You're very smart, and you're also a very interesting fellow. You're also very cute. Ji Tianqing chuckled and asked, right, Jiao, you still haven't told me why you're here. Could it be that you want to leave the Xinwu continent and head to other continents? Jiao shook her head, and her big clear eyes looked around before she answered, I've never thought of leaving the Xinwu continent. Our Taihao Divine Nation is so harmonious and friendly, so why would I want to leave? I'm just in a hurry to rush to the Clear Sky Pagoda to participate in the God-Disciple selection that happens once every 20 years. However, I lost my way halfway there and accidentally stumbled into this place. Then, I met a silly fellow like you. Lost your way? Ji Tianqing's eyes widened in disbelief, and he secretly cursed in his heart, a little girl who can get lost actually dares to call me silly? Who's the silly one here? Of course, he knew that Jiao's words were half true and half false, so he couldn't believe them completely. However, he didn't delve into it, and he only asked the key question. Jiao, what's the God-Disciple selection all about? Jiao patiently answered him and calmly said, the God-Disciple selection is a grand event of the Taihao Divine Nation, and it's held once every 20 years. This time, the God-Disciple selection will begin in 8 months. When the time comes, all the young fighters in the divine nation will have to go through layers of battles and selections. The final 100 young talents who emerge victorious will head to the sacred Clear Sky Pagoda to undergo the final selection. The young talents who are successfully selected will become God disciples with honorable statuses. They will bask in the divine light of the Divine Master and grow up healthily and steadily. If they have outstanding talent and strength, they might even gain the Divine Master's favor and be entrusted with important tasks and rewards. As for the young talents who aren't selected, they can only serve as God's servants. Jiao was still somewhat childish, and her words were rather interesting, but she was also somewhat vague. However, Ji Tianqing could roughly guess that the so-called God disciple selection was actually just like the imperial concubine selection in the secular world. After the new emperor ascended the throne, he would send people to search for beauties all over the world. He would pick out a few hundred of the most outstanding ones and send them to the palace for the emperor to choose from. Those who caught the emperor's eye would be conferred various positions in the imperial harem and concubines. As for those who did not catch the emperor's eye, they could only stay in the palace as maidservants. After Ji Tianqing finished chatting with Jiao about the God disciple selection, he asked her about the Taihao divine nation. The more they talked, the happier they became, and their relationship became closer. Their hands were pressed together, unwilling to let go, and they even forgot about the passage of time. Unknowingly, half a day had passed. Ji Tianqing had more or less asked all the questions he wanted to ask. Only then did he wake up from a dream and remember an important matter. Currently, he could not go to the Shenwu continent, and he had to return to the Tianxian continent as soon as possible. He did not have much time left, and he had to leave this pitch-black void, which was also the Xian Pin Gate, before his strength was exhausted. Otherwise, when his strength was exhausted, the consequences would be unimaginable. In the future, when he reached the primordial spirit realm and resolved his grudges in the Tianxian continent, he would be able to come here again and head to the Shenwu continent. Chapter 13-16. Ji Tianqing saw that it was about time, so he bid farewell to Jiao. Jiao, it's my fortune to have met you here. Thank you for telling me so much, but I can't head to Shenwu continent for the time being. I have to return to the Tianxian continent first, as there are still many things that I need to take care of. Jiao knew that he was about to leave, and a trace of reluctance flashed through her clear eyes. She had not chatted enough, as she still wanted to learn more about the situation in the Tianxian continent from Ji Tianqing. However, she suppressed these thoughts and sincerely said to Ji Tianqing, after today's parting, I don't know when we will meet again. If you can reach Shenwu continent within 8 months, I hope that you can come to the vast divine kingdom and find me at the Clear Sky Pagoda. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. All right, if possible, I will try my best to rush over. I wish you success in passing the selection and becoming a respected God's disciple. Jiao was stunned, but she did not say anything. She only smiled and thanked him. Ji Tianqing waved goodbye to her and then controlled the burial of heaven to fly back. Jiao slowly retracted her small, white hand and looked through the screen at his back as he left. Her lips curled up into a smile. That silly guy actually thinks that I'm going to become a God's disciple. Too stupid. She muttered to herself in a somewhat reproachful tone as her eyes stared at Ji Tianqing's back, unwilling to leave for a long time. After a long time, when Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared into the darkness, she finally retracted her gaze. She suddenly remembered something important, and her smile disappeared as she muttered to herself, in the past 1,000 years, this guy is the first person to enter Xian Pin door without reaching the primordial spirit realm. This Tianqing is definitely a peerless genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. Even in our vast divine kingdom, he can be considered a first-rate youth genius. I have to hurry back and report this news to father so that Tianqing won't be snatched away by another God's master when he comes to Shenwu continent. Jiao hurriedly controlled the gilded throne and flew away at lightning speed. Ji Tianqing controlled the burial of heaven and flew back with all his might. He had already consumed more than half of his strength, and he only had 4 days left. He focused on flying and didn't look at the mysterious screens of light on both sides of the void of space. Burial of Heaven was silent for a long time. Suddenly, he sent a voice transmission, "Tianxing, that little girl is not simple." Ji Tianxing was in a hurry when he heard Burial of Heaven's sudden words. He was startled. Soon after, he came back to his senses and said with a smile, "Of course. She looks like she's only 8 or 9 years old, yet she was able to enter the door of Xian Pin. She definitely has the strength of the primordial soul stage or above. Furthermore, she's from the Shenwu continent. If her parents dared to give birth to 99 children, then her family must be an aristocratic family with a deep foundation." Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment before speaking again. "The poverty and backwardness of the profound sky continent has limited your imagination." Ji Tianxing frowned and unhappily said, "Are you saying that I'm a country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world?" Burial of Heaven did not reply, which was probably a tacit acknowledgement. Ji Tianxing thought to himself, although I've seen some images of the Shenwu continent on the screens, and I've also learned a bit about the situation there from Jiujiu. However, I've never been to the Shenwu continent before, so I don't understand it at all. Thus, I can't make any wild guesses. However, after I head to the Shenwu continent, I'll naturally be able to adapt to it and have a clearer understanding of it. In the future, I'll also be able to become a powerhouse on that continent, very quickly." For days passed. Ji Tianxing's strength was about to be exhausted, but he still hadn't reached the end of the pitch-black void. Helpless, he could only enter Burial of Heaven and enter the Sword's world, where he took some pills and meditated to recover his magic power. Burial of Heaven continued to fly through the void for another day and night before finally reaching the end of the void. At the end of the darkness, there was an oval-shaped door of light. It was obviously a teleportation gate, and the other end was connected to the Nine Heavens platform. Burial of Heaven flew over without hesitation and entered the teleportation gate with a whoosh. 5 kilometers away from the Nine Heavens platform, Ancestor Triforce was standing in the sky above the sea. He had already put away the jade prayer mat and was now pacing back and forth in the sky. From time to time, he would look at the Nine Heavens platform, and from time to time, he would turn his head to look towards the southeast. His expression was somewhat anxious, and his expression was somewhat gloomy. "That damned little bastard. He's already disappeared for 11 days. And he still hasn't appeared. He couldn't have really escaped, right? But what secrets does the Nine Heavens platform hold? Where does it lead to?" Old Ancestor Sanju murmured to himself. His eyes were filled with hatred and killing intent. He turned his head to look towards the southeast sky and anxiously muttered to himself, "I've already sent the message 11 days ago. Why hasn't he come yet? He's a primordial spirit realm powerhouse, and he'll only need 2 or 3 days to get here." As time passed, Ancestor Triforce became more and more anxious. Not long after, a dazzling golden light suddenly appeared in the southeast sky. The golden light was like a sharp arrow piercing through the clouds, and also like lightning tearing through the sky. It sped over at an unimaginable speed. A moment ago, the golden light was still 300 kilometers away. A breath later, the golden light was already 100 kilometers away. Another breath later, the golden light that was more than 10 meters long had already arrived in front of Ancestor Triforce. The golden light stopped 1,000 meters away from him. After the dazzling light gradually dissipated, a tall and muscular figure appeared. This was a middle-aged man who was 10 meters tall and had a domineering and imposing aura. He wore a golden robe embroidered with phoenixes and dragons, and a noble 9-star crown on his head. His square face was upright and dignified, and his bell-sized eyes were deep and vast. The most eye-catching thing was the golden dragon horn protruding from his forehead. Clearly, this person was not a human, but a member of the imperial family of the Eastern Sea, the Golden Dragon clan. When Ancestor Triforce saw this person, he immediately let out a sigh of relief and joy appeared in his eyes. He hurriedly went forward with a face full of smiles. Even from 100 meters away, he respectfully clasped his hands and bowed, "Greetings, Your Majesty Dragon Emperor." "Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, ever since I sent the message, I've been waiting for your arrival. I've been looking left and right for a full 11 days, and you've finally arrived." Without a doubt, this person was the Emperor of the Water Race, the Golden Dragon Emperor. The Golden Dragon Emperor frowned when he saw how excited Ancestor Triforce was, as if he had seen his savior. He raised his hands, indicating for Ancestor Triforce to rise, and said in a dignified manner, "Ancestor Triforce, rise. Ever since we parted, you haven't visited this emperor in 100 years. In these past years, the tributes of the Heaven Ascension sect have been handed over by the juniors. Why did you suddenly send me a message and invite me to this dangerous forbidden area?" Chapter 13-17. Although the Heaven Evasion sect was a human sect and was hidden deep within the Eastern Sea's ruins, the Eastern Sea's ruins was the Eastern Sea's ruins. However, the entire Eastern Sea was under the jurisdiction of the Water Race's imperial court. For the Heaven Evasion sect to be able to survive in the ruins of ruins for 3,000 years, they naturally had to rely on the Water Race's imperial court for permission and protection. Thus, every 10 years, the Heaven Evasion sect had to hand over a batch of priceless tributes to the Water Race's imperial court. Old Ancestor Sanju and the Golden Dragon Emperor had known each other since 1,000 years ago. Although the relationship between the two was that of a ruler and a subject, the two of them didn't meet many times, so their relationship couldn't be considered close. However, the two of them still had some friendship, so the Golden Dragon Emperor was willing to give old Ancestor Sanju face and come to the Nine Heavens platform. As soon as the two of them met, the Golden Dragon Emperor went straight to the point and asked about old Ancestor Sanju's intentions. Old Ancestor Sanju didn't beat around the bush and pointed at the Nine Heavens platform not far away, explaining, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, the surprise I mentioned is on the Nine Heavens platform." The Golden Dragon Emperor was no stranger to the Nine Heavens platform and had come here several times in the past 1,000 years. However, he knew how mysterious and terrifying the Nine Heavens platform was and never dared to enter it. He had to be careful even when he approached the Nine Heavens platform. At this moment, he turned to look at the Nine Heavens platform and carefully observed it for a moment before asking with a frown, "There's nothing above the Nine Heavens platform and it's the same as usual. Where did the surprise come from?" Old Ancestor Sanju revealed a playful smile and stroked his beard, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, don't be anxious and listen to my explanation. 3 months ago, a bastard snuck into our sect and started a massacre. He killed our left and right protectors and many elders and deacons. I was cultivating in seclusion when the elders knocked on my door and woke me up. Thus, I brought the sect master and worked together to hunt that bastard down. We chased him all the way here." Progenitor Sanju briefly explained what had happened to Qin Nan. Of course, he didn't reveal the reason for the battle, nor did he mention Ji Tianqing's identity and name. He emphasized that Ji Tianqing had a divine black dragon divine beast and a peerless divine sword. Most importantly, after Ji Tianqing escaped to the Nine Heavens platform, not only was he not killed by the divine lightning, he even used the power of the divine lightning to temper his body, making him even more powerful. Even the Golden Dragon Emperor, who was knowledgeable, was dumbstruck by Patriarch Sanju's words. What? That person actually took the initiative to trigger the divine thunder of the ninth heaven. Even after being struck by the divine thunder, he can still cultivate and become stronger? Golden Dragon Emperor's eyes widened in shock as he stared intently at the Nine Heavens platform. Old Ancestor Sanju nodded repeatedly and added fuel to the fire. "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, that kid has a divine beast, Black Dragon, but the Dragon clan is your people. How can they be enslaved by him? Moreover, the reason he was able to enter the ninth heaven platform and withstand the divine lightning was all thanks to the divine sword. That divine dragon and that divine sword should belong to you. Only a peerless sovereign and wise ruler like you is worthy of possessing such peerless divine items. Most importantly, in the thousands of years since ancient times, who has been able to decipher the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform? That kid was able to cultivate and become stronger in the Nine Heavens platform. He must have grasped the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform. If you can obtain this secret, you will be able to benefit the Water Clan. Old ancestor Sanju's words were undoubtedly very tempting. The Golden Dragon Emperor's blood was boiling, and his heart was filled with a strong desire and anticipation. But how wise was the Golden Dragon Emperor? How could he not see through old ancestor Sanju's intentions? He looked at old ancestor Sanju with a cold smile and said in a mocking tone, "Since this has already happened 3 months ago, why did you only inform me 10 days ago? You must have wanted to take the Black Dragon and the Divine Sword for yourself, but you couldn't do anything to that kid. You had no choice but to report this matter to me, right?" Old ancestor Sanju's face was filled with awkwardness. He smiled slightly and said humbly, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor's foresight is truly divine. You truly are the peerless sovereign of the East Sea." The Golden Dragon Emperor glanced at him indifferently and waved his hand. "Enough nonsense. Where is that kid now? The Nine Heavens platform is clearly empty." Old ancestor Sanju hurriedly explained, "This matter is even more mysterious. 11 days ago, that kid used the power of lightning to turn the entire Nine Heavens platform purple. After that, a huge teleportation gate appeared on the Nine Heavens platform. That kid entered the teleportation gate and disappeared." The Golden Dragon Emperor frowned and glared coldly at old ancestor Sanju. He said in a deep voice, "You dare to trick me? That kid must have left through the teleportation gate. He has already been gone for 11 days. What's the point of me coming here now?" This. Old ancestor Sanju saw that the Golden Dragon Emperor was angry and was filled with fear. He wanted to explain, but he was powerless. He racked his brain for a while and came up with a lame excuse. He hurriedly said, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, none of us know the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform. This one guesses that the kid might have returned to the Nine Heavens platform. Even if he has already escaped far away, this matter is too mysterious. I will definitely have to report it to you. Only with your wisdom and talent can you unravel the mystery behind this. You old bastard." The Golden Dragon Emperor cursed. He wanted to reprimand him, but he didn't know where to start. After all, old ancestor Sanju's attitude was very respectful and he was flattering him. He was caught off guard. Right at that moment, the Nine Heavens platform suddenly flashed and a black light appeared. The Golden Dragon Emperor and old ancestor Sanju remained silent. They stared at the black light with sharp eyes and carefully observed it. In order to see it more clearly, the Golden Dragon Emperor flew to the pitch-black mountain peak and stood at the edge of the Nine Heavens platform. Old ancestor Sanju hurriedly followed and stood beside the Golden Dragon Emperor. He pointed at the mysterious black light and said excitedly, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, look. It's that divine sword. It has finally appeared." The Golden Dragon Emperor stared at the black light and carefully examined it. Sure enough, he saw a 3-foot-long pitch-black treasured sword within the black light. He originally thought that when the treasured sword appeared, the Nine Heavens platform would react and send down a bolt of divine lightning. However, the Nine Heavens platform remained calm and tranquil. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The pitch-black treasured sword only stopped for a moment before flying into the sky like lightning. It crossed the bottomless abyss and flew into the distance. Seeing this, old ancestor Sanju anxiously shouted, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, that's the divine sword. Quickly stop it. You mustn't let it escape." The Golden Dragon Emperor was also shocked. His eyes were filled with anticipation and his body flashed as he teleported over. After 2 breaths, the pitch-black treasured sword crossed the bottomless abyss and the pitch-black mountain peak and finally left the Nine Heavens platform. However, it was stopped by the Golden Dragon Emperor when it flew over the sea. Chapter 13:18. When the path of the burial of heaven was blocked, it turned around without hesitation and flew in the other direction. Whoosh! It was extremely fast. Like a black streak of light, it tore through the sky and flew 20 miles in an instant. Ancestor 3 Extinction chased after it with all his might, but he was left further and further behind. It was impossible for him to catch up in a short time. However, the Golden Dragon Emperor's methods were extraordinary. As expected of a nascent soul supreme. His figure flashed and turned into a streak of golden light, teleporting continuously in the sky. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! Every time the golden light flickered, he could cross 100 miles in the sky and teleport close to 100 miles away. Such terrifying speed was something the Sword of Burial of Heaven couldn't compare to. In just 3 short breaths, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was stopped by the Golden Dragon Emperor on the surface of the sea hundreds of miles away. Heaven's shaking claw. The Golden Dragon Emperor roared and raised his palm, sending out a golden light that covered the sky. It turned into a giant golden dragon claw that descended from the sky and grabbed at the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Suddenly, the space within a radius of dozens of miles was sealed by an invisible force. The Sword of Burial of Heaven's speed suddenly slowed, as if it had fallen into a quagmire. It struggled with all its might but couldn't escape. The golden dragon claw that blotted out the sky gradually closed in and was about to grab the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Ancestor 3 Extinction just happened to rush over and saw this scene. He was immediately filled with excitement and shouted emotionally, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, that kid and the Divine Black Dragon are hiding in the Divine Sword." The Golden Dragon Emperor knew what was going on and used all his strength to capture and seal the Sword of Burial of Heaven. A moment later, the giant golden dragon claw slowly tightened and captured the Sword of Burial of Heaven. The Golden Dragon Emperor controlled the giant dragon claw to grab the Sword of Burial of Heaven and fly it back to him. The Sword of Burial of Heaven struggled with all its might, but it couldn't break free from the dragon claw. It could only give up for the time being. The Golden Dragon Emperor examined the Sword of Burial of Heaven at close range. He observed the material and patterns on the blade and felt the sword's aura. He immediately revealed a look of surprise. A peak top-grade soul weapon, a half-step divine artifact. A broken sword? Why was it a broken sword? If it was only a half-step divine artifact, how could it withstand the 9 heavens' divine lightning without collapsing? No, there's something wrong with this broken sword. It's definitely a magical treasure that surpasses the primordial spirit realm. Previously, when the Golden Dragon Emperor heard Patriarch Sanju say that the sword was a divine artifact, he thought that it was a primordial spirit artifact. After all, at the Tian Xian land, primordial soul stage treasures were the top and publicly recognized divine weapons. However, he was experienced and knowledgeable. After observing the Sword of Burial of Heaven with his own eyes, he could tell that this sword was extraordinary. It was definitely not some primordial soul-level sword. When Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes heard his words, he hurriedly came over and looked at the Burial of Heaven with a greedy gaze. Of course, he lowered his head slightly to conceal the greed in his eyes, not daring to show it in front of the Golden Dragon Emperor. "Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, I've long noticed that this sword is extraordinary. It's a peerless divine sword. Now, you only need to kill that brat and you'll be able to obtain the divine sword and a divine black dragon." As Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes tempted the Golden Dragon Emperor and urged him to kill Ji Tianqing, he carefully observed the Golden Dragon Emperor's expression. Although the Golden Dragon Emperor did not understand the situation, he would not be blinded by joy. He saw through Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's intentions and said indifferently, "As for how to deal with this divine sword and the black dragon, I'll decide. There's no need for you to tell me what to do. This matter ends here. I'm going to take the divine sword back to the imperial court. You can leave now." Ah. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was stunned and cursed in his heart, "Damn you, Golden Dragon Emperor. You're burning the bridge after crossing the river and chasing me away after obtaining the divine sword? This won't do. I have to see him kill Ji Tianqing before I can be at ease." Seeing that Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was unwilling to leave, the Golden Dragon Emperor comforted him again. "Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, I appreciate your kindness. The Imperial Court owes you a favor. If you encounter any difficulties in the future or if your life is in danger, I promise to save your life. How about it?" After receiving the Golden Dragon Emperor's promise, old ancestor 3 absolutes felt much better. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The Golden Dragon Emperor ignored him and turned to leave. However, at this moment, the burial of heaven flashed and a figure appeared out of thin air. Whoosh! This was a young man in a white robe. He appeared in the sky without any warning and stood in front of the Golden Dragon Emperor and Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes. The white-robed young man was 8 feet tall and had a tall figure. He had a handsome face and an invisible aura emitted from his body, making him look especially mysterious and noble. He looked at the Golden Dragon Emperor with a smile and said in a playful tone, "Your Majesty, I trust you've been well since we last met. Where are you taking me?" The Golden Dragon Emperor and Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes were stunned. Both of them widened their eyes and stared at the white-robed young man. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was the most agitated. His eyes were bloodshot as he gritted his teeth and shouted, "You damn bastard, you finally can't hide it anymore? It's time for you to die." The Golden Dragon Emperor was also stunned. He revealed an expression of disbelief and said, "You're Ji Tianqing. How could it be you?" Ji Tianqing looked at Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes with a playful gaze and said to the Golden Dragon Emperor, "Of course it's me. Other than me, who else would have a black dragon and a divine sword? Other than me, who else could kill the sect master and guardian elder of the Heaven Evasion sect and make Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes hate me to the core?" The Golden Dragon Emperor was stunned. He looked at him deeply and sighed with a complicated expression. "Yes. Other than you, the #1 monster in the world, who else would have such great ability? No wonder when I saw this divine sword, I vaguely felt a sense of déjà vu. When Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes told me about your enmity with the Heaven Evasion sect, I should have guessed that it was you." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He cupped his hands and asked, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, can you return the treasured sword to me now?" The Golden Dragon Emperor came back to his senses and smiled awkwardly. He quickly handed the Sword of Burial of Heaven to him. "I didn't think that this was a misunderstanding. Since that's the case, this divine sword should be returned to its rightful owner." Ji Tianqing didn't hesitate and quickly took the Sword of Burial of Heaven back. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes stood to the side and looked at Ji Tianqing and the Golden Dragon Emperor talking cheerfully. He was dumbfounded. He looked at Ji Tianqing and then at the Golden Dragon Emperor. He said with an embarrassed expression, You know each other?" Hearing his words, the two of them turned their heads to look at him. The Golden Dragon Emperor was expressionless, but his eyes were a bit gloomy. Ji Tianqing smiled coldly and explained, "That's right. More than a year ago, I went to the Water Race Imperial Court to pay a visit to Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor. Moreover, the Crown Prince of the Water Race Imperial Court, Prince Tai Yi, is my sworn brother." When he heard this, Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's face turned pale. His eyes were filled with deep regret. At this moment, he knew that he had kicked an iron plate. Chapter 13-19. Just as Ancestor Sanju was feeling regretful, the Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed as he remembered something. He cupped his hands at Ji Tianqing and said sincerely, "Tianqing, when you mentioned Tai, this emperor recalled the previous matter. The demon race infiltrated the East Sea and caused a bloodbath. They slaughtered tens of millions of people and caused hundreds of millions of our people to lose their homes. Fortunately, you helped Tai quell the chaos in the East Sea and eliminate the evil demon race experts. If you hadn't appeared in time, the entire East Sea would have been in danger. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Here, this emperor represents all the people of the water race to express my deep gratitude to you." After saying that, the Golden Dragon Emperor bowed solemnly to Ji Tianqing to express his gratitude. Ji Tianqing raised his hands, indicating that the Golden Dragon Emperor could dispense with the formalities. Seeing this scene, Ancestor Sanju's expression became even more unsightly. His eyes were filled with deep shock. He never would have thought that Ji Tianqing was not only the sworn brother of the water race's crown prince, but also the imperial court of the water race owed him such a great favor. If he had known this earlier, he definitely wouldn't have reported it to the Golden Dragon Emperor. He was digging his own grave. Ancestor Sanju's intestines turned green with regret. He only wanted to turn around and run away. However, Ji Tianqing stared at him and released an invisible spiritual power to suppress him. Ancestor Sanju, you old thing, you're really despicable. You're simply despicable to the extreme. You want to steal my divine sword and black dragon, but you know that you're not strong enough, so you want to kill with a borrowed knife. You want to use His Majesty the Dragon Emperor? This is good. I'll let His Majesty personally witness how you die under my sword. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing held the Burial of Heaven sword in his hand. His entire body surged with killing intent as he prepared to attack. Ancestor Sanju's expression changed. Deep hatred surged in his eyes, and his entire body emitted a biting cold killing intent. You little bastard, you're actually the one who's the bad guy first. Since that's the case, let His Majesty the Dragon Emperor be the witness. We'll settle this grudge here. You cruelly killed our sect master, left and right protectors, and many elders. Today, I'll cut you into pieces to avenge them. Instantly, the atmosphere became tense and filled with killing intent. The sea within a radius of 100 miles was swept up by a terrifying hurricane, and huge waves of 1,000 feet were swept up. That was the impact of the collision between Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju's souls. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes knew that Ji Tianqing's strength had increased several times after being tempered by the divine lightning. However, he was an expert at the half-step essence soul realm. How could he be afraid of a junior? Of course, he couldn't, the Dragon Emperor, the Dragon Emperor. As expected, the Dragon Emperor couldn't sit still. He looked at Ji Tianqing and then at Ancestor Sanju. He immediately frowned. He stretched out his hands and gestured for the two to stop. He said in a dignified tone, Tianqing, Ancestor Sanju, I don't know about the grudge between the two of you. I won't stop you from settling your grudge. I'll also remain neutral and not help either side. However, the two of you can't die. As long as I'm here, I won't let either of you kill the other. After today, you can do whatever you want. The Dragon Emperor's attitude was very clear. Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju could settle their grudge, but neither of them could be killed. If Ji Tianqing was killed, he would have let down Tai, the people of the Water Tribe, and his own conscience. If Ancestor Sanju was killed, he would have gone back on his word. He wouldn't be the emperor of the imperial court of the Water Tribe. After all, he had just promised Ancestor Sanju that he would save him if his life was in danger. After making his stance clear, he retreated far away and stood high in the sky to watch the battle. Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju were stunned for a moment and frowned in dissatisfaction. If they couldn't kill each other, how could it be called settling their grudge? The two sides had already formed a blood feud. It could only end with one of them dying. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, he remembered something. Previously, when he was reading the ancient books in the Heavenly Book Pavilion, he had seen an ancient secret technique that was very powerful and domineering. Thinking of that secret technique, he immediately had an idea. Even if I can't kill Ancestor Sanju, I have a way to make him suffer a fate worse than death. After making up his mind, he no longer hesitated. His body burst out with golden light that shot into the sky. He waved the broken sword and charged towards Ancestor Sanju. Old thief, take this. Swoosh. Ji Tianqing suddenly pulled out the Burial of Heaven and slashed out a dazzling sword light that was hundreds of feet long towards Ancestor Sanju. On the surface, this sword-drawing technique looked no different from before. However, the power of the sword light was 6 times stronger. Moreover, the blazing white sword light contained the power of purple lightning. Ancestor Sanju was thinking about how to resolve the hatred in his heart without killing Ji Tianqing. When the sword light attacked, he came back to his senses. His expression immediately changed and his eyes became extremely serious. Without hesitation, he waved his palms and struck out 2 giant golden palms to block the sword light. Bang! Bang! With 2 muffled sounds, the giant golden palms were shattered by the sword light. The power of the purple lightning sword light did not decrease. It struck Ancestor Sanju and sent him flying. At that moment, his magic power shield was shattered. The power of the divine lightning in the sword light turned into tens of thousands of electric arcs and drilled into his body. Lightning bolts flashed crazily, making crackling sounds. He was charred black on the spot. His body was stiff and numb. He could not use any magic power. He drew an arc in the sky and crashed into the sea below in a wretched state. However, he was a half-step essence soul realm expert after all. He came to his senses in an instant. His body emitted a dazzling golden light as he charged into the sky. That damned bastard. He really does control the power of lightning. Ancestor Sanju bellowed in shock. Black smoke spewed out of his mouth. His blackened face looked extremely comical. At that moment, Ji Tianqing charged over again. He stabbed out with the sword of burial of heaven. Swish! A cold white light with hints of purple flashed before disappearing instantly. Ancestor Sanju had seen how terrifying this sword technique was and was already prepared. He hurriedly retreated and used all his strength to shrink his defense. He took out a superior-grade soul-level Dharma treasure and used it to block in front of him. It was a grayish-brown flag. It had all sorts of effects and magical uses. Its defense was impressive as well. However, when the cold light suddenly exploded, the flag was blown to pieces on the spot. It turned into countless shards that splattered everywhere. Boom! The dazzling cold light, wrapped in tens of thousands of bolts of purple lightning, exploded in the sky and affected a radius of several hundred kilometers. Ancestor Sanju was at the center of the explosion. He obviously suffered the most. He was blown away on the spot. Over a dozen cracks appeared on his body as blood spurted out. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.